Head to Knoxville, don't be late. Baker's Live, it's gonna be great. June 5th and 6th, mark your date at Dollywood, we'll celebrate. Meet Baker and more cool friends. Live show magic that never ends. Come to Dollywood, feel the vibe. With great people there, it's gonna be a ride. Rides, fun, and meet and greet. Baker and pals, the crew's so sweet. Get ready for laughs, cheers, and thrills. Knoxville's the place, it's giving chills. Meet Baker and more cool friends. Live show magic that never ends. Come to Dollywood, feel the vibe. With great people there, it's gonna be a ride. June 5th and 6th, don't miss the fun. Meet Baker and friends, it's second to none. Baker and friends, it's second to
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome back to the afternoon stream in the Todd Mullis case. Will he get a new trial? This is a trial from 2019 where Todd Mullis was found guilty and sentenced to life without parole in the unaliving case against his wife. Allegedly, he hit her twice with a corn rake in the back, then put her in a truck, drove to the hospital, got stopped by 911, by the ambulance after calling 911, and instantly, they believed he had done it. I didn't watch the first trial. I read some pieces about it. Some of it makes sense. Some of it doesn't make sense. So far, the first witness we went through was an EMT who arrived at the scene. Didn't really notice the injuries. Then we were supposed to have a doctor testifying. They wanted to treat her as a hostile witness and do leading questions. There was a lot of hoo-ha about that. And they weren't allowed after discussing it with the judge. So nothing really has come in so far. Thank you, Farrell, for sending me some pictures. As always, I'll try to keep as much as the outside of the court stuff outside of the coverage, because again, I didn't watch the first trial. I don't know anything but what I read about it. Allegedly, his motive was his wife has been unfaithful before, and now she was unfaithful with a ranch hand, and he didn't know about it, but he knew about it. To me, that doesn't make sense. I really hope there'll be some evidence that can prove this, because I don't know if they claim that he knew about it. Then why didn't he know about it? So to me, it's kind of a. So far, I don't have enough information to say that he was railroaded or not railroaded in the first trial. allegedly his son weren't believed. His defense admitted some things that he didn't agree with in the first trial. He have had an appeal motion that was overturned, so he didn't get an appeal on the facts. But that's why he's suing in a civil lawsuit to try and get another trial. Allegedly, they will bring witnesses with new information, and we'll just have to wait and see what's going on. Yeah, if there's ever been an affair in your life, you're guilty. Well, and the funny part is, that affair was an old one, and he got suspicious because he had 128 or 175 text messages with some guy who worked at the farm. But then he talked to his wife, and she said, no, everything's fine. We're having a wonderful marriage. But then they found out that later, after she had passed away, that they did have an affair. But no one said he knew about it. So how can it be a motive if he didn't know about it? To me, that's... And some friends said she wanted a divorce because he was controlling her. Well, let's be honest. If you've been hoeing around and your husband say, honey bunny, I don't trust you. I don't trust you anymore because...
All right, it's exhibit 380 page.
It's already back. You have once been breaking our vows of at our marriage, so I don't trust you. And it sounded like she was working at a nurse, and he said, you can't work as a nurse anymore. That sounds to me like she might have been banging someone at work. And is it totally crazy to say to your wife, hey, you're banging the nurse or you're banging the doctor? Okay, I'm willing to work on our marriage, but you have to not be around this person anymore. To me, that would be a fair thing to say. And then she's claiming he's controlling her, but if she was banging someone else again, I'm sorry. Not victim blaming, but my buddy's grandfather always said, you lose them as you win them. That's why you should never, ever get with a girl that you get with who is in a relationship, because she'll get with someone else when she's in a relationship with you. But there's also a very good thing that I have always lived by. I don't mind if you're unfaithful. Just tell me, I'll pack your shit, and you can just move out, because if you're unfaithful once, you'll be it twice. So I've always said, well, that's fair. You don't want me anymore. You want someone else. See you later. I don't work on the problem, because the problem isn't me. It's you. You wanted to bang someone else. You did it. Fine. Hope you got it out of your system or whatever. I'm not sticking around for it, because you'll do it again the next time you're bored. So I'm just, if you want to bang someone else and he says, okay, I'll forgive you. I'll give you a second chance. We have 3 kids. We have a farm. We have a house. Then you should be allowed to say, you shouldn't work with the guy you banged. To me, that's not an unreasonable. It's the same if it was one of you ladies who said, no, you can't hang out with a woman that you used to bang. Well, I promise I'll never do it again. Yeah, go F yourself. No, because once bitten, twice shy. Hola,
All right,
Pixie.
if we're ready to go back on the record.
Well, if she is unfulfilled, get the heck out. Say, well, I'm unfulfilled. I'm leaving. Get the heck out of there.
We'll maybe pick back up
with the last thing that we discussed, which was the issue of the demonstrative exhibits. I did receive those from Ms. Nichols-Cook. And counsel, if you could just clarify for me, there are 3 photos, it looks like, and they have measurements on them. The measurements came from where?
Exhibit 380, page 3. These are measurements. Okay. All right, it's exhibit 380, page 4. These are measurements that were noted at autopsy by Dr. Cruz.
If I can, we had a chance over lunch to verify that. We don't have any objection to those 3 exhibits.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
At some point.
Are we picking back up then with Dr. Cruz's testimony or switching gears?
We're picking back up, Your Honor. Given what was originally indicated to us as her limited availability, we wanted to accommodate her today by having her called out of order, and we want to move this case forward. So, our views about the court's really.
Well, that's great. If the federal investigation is over, then there's no reason to keep any of the motions to conceal it. Everything should be open for court then.
We respect it and we'll proceed. I do have one thing to note, which I'll be brief, but I just think this will help head off objections potentially, to just explain one issue for the court before we continue, which is just that the court's ruling was that Dr. Cruz would be limited to the opinions that had been disclosed, meaning, in our view, opinions that she held as of her 2023 deposition. I don't want to open the door to invite, whether she has other opinions that she's developed later, I don't want to invite those. So some of the questions I'm going to ask her are going to be framed in that way, as of your 2023 deposition, so that I'm not opening the door. And I don't want that to be beginning of a question that prompts objections or some concern about why I'm cabining it. That's the purpose, Your Honor.
Understood, and I would consider that simply to be directing the witness maybe to a specific area rather than hopefully leading that would be objectionable. And certainly now that counsel has an understanding that that may be coming, we should all be on the same page. So if Dr. Cruz is available, great, thank you.
Maybe.
Welcome back, Dr. Cruz. Go ahead and have a seat. And I would just remind.
Kind of funny to hoe a hoe, though. New trial. That was actually a pretty good one, Brendan. I'll give you that one. The hoeing of the hoe trial.
Remind you that you remain under oath. Ms. Thompson.
He believes that his defense presented statements at opening that he didn't agree with, and that they have new evidence that could prove his innocence. That's why we are having this trial.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Cruz, before we broke for lunch, I think you had told us that you made a determination at the time of the autopsy that the manner of Ms. Mullis's death was homicide, and that's where I want to pick us back up. What are the possible manner of death findings that a forensic pathologist can make?
There are 5 options in terms of manner of death. The most common option is natural, so that's death due purely to natural disease. There's suicide, death at the hands of oneself. There's accident, death due to a hostile environment or unforeseen circumstances. There's homicide, death at the hands of another, and undetermined, which is used when you have all the information available and cannot choose one of the other manners, or you have compelling information for 2 competing manners.
And for a forensic pathologist to make a manner of death finding that a death is a homicide, what is the level of proof that a forensic pathologist needs to have?
There's no exact determination. It uses our medical judgment. I set a very high standard for myself, and often in court it's termed as to a reasonable degree of medical certainty.
Well, isn't there a standard that to make a finding that a death is a homicide, that a forensic pathologist needs to have clear and convincing evidence that that death was a homicide?
I would put that with a reasonable degree of medical certainty. Clear and convincing evidence is vague. It's really up to the pathologist.
to make that finding, well, let me ask you this. Do you disagree that the appropriate standard is clear and convincing evidence?
I find it to be vague, but that's what other people are comfortable with. I don't have huge issues with it.
Is that the standard in your profession, clear and convincing evidence?
By whom?
By what the generally accepted practices are in forensic pathology.
I need more information on who's making that general principle.
Is there any general acceptance in the field of forensic pathology about what the level of proof a forensic pathologist needs to have to find that a death was a homicide?
The National Association of Medical Examiners gives guidelines for manners of death. Manner of death can be complicated and different circumstances require different determinations. So clear and convincing evidence.
Why is there always a vocal fry in every case? We used to have the court cover, now we have the vocal fry. And so annoying to listen to. And we talked about Miss Little having that shaky voice in the first few hearings in the Karen Reed case, and it seems like she has listened to that and has worked on being more assertive when she produces her, or when she's speaking. This doctor could also try not to sound like she's, first of all, very bored, and then have this vocal fry that just hurts the brain. Seems like it's a choice you make. Instead of speaking normally, you talk like this.
I would really need more information as to what that means to you or another person in a certain scenario.
And I understand, but my question is, Dr. Cruz, not what you understand, but what the generally accepted practices in forensic pathology.
I guess I'm not an expert in terms of who you think everyone is in terms of generally accepted practices.
So that's not a question you're able to answer.
I see what you're getting at, but I've seen that term in the same way I've seen reasonable degree of medical certainty. Sure, I do agree, but I haven't polled every medical examiner to see if that's generally accepted by everybody.
So am I right then that you don't know what the generally accepted standard is in your field for making a determination of homicide?
I would argue that no one knows what everybody thinks within my field.
And you understand that I'm not asking you what everyone thinks. I'm asking you what's generally accepted.
Well, I would have to see where that came from for you to tell me that. I've seen that many, many times, generally accepted practices or in terms of how much evidence you need, how much medical certainty you need. So sure, I'll agree with you.
All right, thanks, Dr. Cruz. Was there any evidence at the time of autopsy that Ms. Mullis died by suicide?
No.
Was there any evidence that her death was a natural death?
No.
Am I right that that left you three options for manners of death then?
Yes.
And that left you with it being undetermined, an accident, or homicide?
I suppose.
Well, did you have some other possible finding?
You have 5 different types of unaliving that you can put on the record. If the 2 of them are gone, you don't suppose the 3 of them is left. They are left.
That was available to you besides those 3 once you'd ruled out natural and suicide?
I think it suggests that I considered accident, which was not the manner of death.
Mike, and I appreciate that, but once you had decided it wasn't a suicide and it wasn't natural, we have 3 other possible options left, understanding you picked one of the 3.
Correct, but I'd like to be sure that that doesn't indicate that was my natural order of thought.
Well, understood, and I think that's what we're talking about here today. At the time of autopsy, what was your understanding of the number of times that the corn rake that was at issue in this case had?
It had 4.
And at the time of autopsy, how many penetrating injuries did you determine that Ms. Mullis had in her back?
6.
Did you focus your autopsy analysis ultimately on the cause of those 6 penetrating injuries in her back?
Welcome,
Could you
Shannon Cooper.
state that? I'm sorry.
Sure. I mean, was it your determination at autopsy that those...
We had that big argument before we went on break where they said, hey, let's treat her as hostile. And I see her as hostile right now, but she had nowhere else to go and get her opinions.
that the area where those 6 penetrating injuries were in her back, that those injuries were the cause of her death?
Yes, those injuries were the cause of her death.
So that's the area of her body you were focused on ultimately in making your determination about what the cause and manner of her death were?
Sure.
I want to, and I think you said this to us a second ago, that that at the time of your 2023 deposition in this case, and let me ask you first if you recall being deposed in 2023.
Yes.
At the time of your 2023 deposition in this case, what was your understanding of why Ms. Mullis's death could not have been an accident?
Welcome, Kenneth.
Could you define what I mean, my understanding or how I came to that determination?
Well, let me ask you this. At the time of your deposition in 2023, why did you determine that Ms. Mullis's death could not have been an accident?
My determination of why it wasn't an accident goes back to 2018 and has remained the same throughout, so I can explain that determination if you'd like.
Please do.
So an accident, as it was initially suggested, would say that Ms. Mullis fell on the corn rake. There hasn't been, as far as I know, any argument to the contrary in terms of the corn rake causing her injuries. I conceded at the deposition, and I believe it to be reasonable, that a person could potentially fall on a sharp object, such as the corn rake, once. To think, as a medical doctor, that someone...
I really like that attorney as well. I think she's competent. I don't like this witness.
No.
I don't like when they get so defensive.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't need to hide something. She just have to state the facts. And if she doesn't believe that it was an accident, just say it. Don't do all the word salad. It annoys me. And all the recovery addicts, welcome. I'm hoping he is doing fine. He just have something to do, but you are more than welcome to hang out with us while he is doing whatever he has to do. And we will try, well, we won't do it as good as he does it, but we'll try and keep you entertained.
could fall on something backwards, be impaled entirely through their torso.
They are more than welcome, and I hope that you it's not anything bad that you need to take a break, but they are always more than welcome. We know only good people come from your side.
Pull that object out through the back of them, then fall on it again, pull it out, and potentially fall on it a third time, which I think seems reasonable, is way outside any degree of medical certainty. There are a number of different injuries that could potentially support a fall, such as blunt force injuries to the posterior surfaces of Miss Mullis's body, say to the back of her head, her shoulders, her hips, her buttocks, even to her elbows, things that I would see in someone who has fallen, as I have seen many deaths due to falls. None of them were there. So it's lack of supporting evidence for an accident, and also the thought that she could fall on the rake, pull it out, fall on it again, is entirely impossible from a medical standpoint. I also did reason in her additional injuries. She had a number of additional injuries to the anterior surfaces of her body. So to suggest that she fell backward, then somehow sustained injuries to the front surfaces of her bodies, then maybe falling forward, is entirely impossible.
Well, the most compelling finding for you that led you to conclude.
Oh, fancy meetings with YouTube. Well, hope he tells them that Turner Group, not Turner Group, that group that gave me a strike is a-hole.
That this was not an accident was that, and I say this with respect to Ms. Mullis, but I don't really know another way to say it, that there were more holes in her back than there were tines in the rake. Isn't it true that that was the most compelling finding for you that led you to conclude that it was not an accident?
Yes.
And from the testimony you just provided, at the time that you determined that this was a homicide back at the autopsy in 2018, could you envision any way that Ms. Mullis could have fallen on this rake more than once and caused her injuries?
No.
How long did your autopsy of Ms. Mullis take?
I don't recall entirely. I know I had stated in my prior depositions and testimonies about 3 hours.
That is a pretty standard time for you in terms of how long an autopsy would take?
I perform more than one autopsy at a time, so it really depends on the type of cases I have that day. It simply depends.
When you say that you're doing more than one autopsy at once, you have more than one body in the autopsy suite that you're looking at the same time. Is that what you mean by that?
Yes.
In your prior testimony in this case, did you say that your autopsy of Ms. Mullis took between 2 and 3 hours?
I'd have to go back and look, but I think that's a reasonable statement.
Well, if I represented to you that that was your prior testimony, do you have any reason to think that's wrong?
No.
And you said that you do more than one autopsy. Let me start that question again. Back in 2018, you said that you would do more than one autopsy at a time.
Yes.
Does that mean that during the 2 to 3 hours that you would have been looking at Ms. Mullis's body, that you weren't spending that entire time looking at her body?
No, I wouldn't be standing there the entire time.
And that's because you'd be looking, is that because you'd be looking at more than one body over that time period?
It would be a mixture of me looking at other bodies, and I have an autopsy technician who assists me with the autopsy process. There are components to the autopsy that they do alone, and I don't need to be there.
In that process where you are looking at more than one body at once, is your attention divided between different cases and different bodies?
Yes.
I think she's just doing the female power attorney, but the shirt doesn't fit with the jacket. Might be because she's a little hefty. That it just looks weird. Jess have found autopsy pictures, and I have to say, to me those, and I'm not sure I can show them, but they'll probably be put on the Discord. To me, it doesn't line up with rake wounds. It looks really weird. Jemima, if I don't know if you'll share it on the Discord, but because the rake should be, as I see it, let's just do this. You should have like a pattern with the rake, but that's absolutely not the case with those pictures. There's one up here, one down here, one over here, and then two like that. That doesn't make sense if it's a rake. I'll make this a little bigger. Yeah, there's like three bigger ones, and then these two are smaller in the middle. But wouldn't a rake be consistent with on in a line?
That's what I mean. Like if you, I mean, I understand they're all over the place, but also like the position of the body of when it fell on it, and if you're falling on it, weird. I don't know. See, that's why it's so. It's
No,
a weird
but
thing.
this is if you have her, if you kind of have her torso like this, then you have it looks like you have one somewhere up here, one in the middle of the back, and one over on this side, and then you have, I'll just change the color on this one, and then you have one like this and one like this. To me, that doesn't make sense. That why do you have this curvature here? Well, I don't know.
Do you know how many different bodies you were looking at during the 2 to 3 hours that you did the autopsy for Ms. Mullis?
I do not recall. No.
Was it more than 4?
No.
Was it more than 3?
It should not have been more than 3 at that period of time. We did no more than 3 in one day.
Back.
I do want to talk to you about the information that you had at autopsy. At the time that you conducted the autopsy of Ms. Mullis back in 2018, the time at which, as you testified, you determined that her cause of death.
For those of you who don't know, this is a corn rake. And that's what I'm saying. It's in a line. It's a curved blade, but the tips are in a line. So they should be, the puncture wound should be in a line as well. And I just can't make that make sense with the wounds I'm seeing. And I only see 5 wounds on the autopsy picture.
Was,
honestly, I feel like,
or that the manner of her death was.
Okay. In my mind, I feel like falling on it accidentally in a weird way, you know, because like you could be trying to catch yourself or something, maybe those wounds could be done. But like, I feel like hitting somebody with it, you would get more of an alignment versus
It
like,
doesn't change
falling on
physics.
it?
It's either a straight line or it's not a straight line. It doesn't matter how you're falling on it. If you saw the picture, let's just do it. It doesn't make sense. Those doesn't make sense, no matter if she was hit or if she fell. For me to see it.
Was a homicide. Did you have a short conversation with Dr. Craig Thompson before you conducted that autopsy?
I did.
And Dr. Craig Thompson was a medical doctor, is that correct?
Yes.
Was he a forensic pathologist?
No.
Was he someone who had your same level of qualifications to evaluate injuries?
You'd have to ask Dr. Thompson. I'm actually not quite too sure what type of a doctor he is.
You don't
But
know.
you understood, at the time you talked to Dr. Thompson, you knew that he was, what, did you know that he was not a forensic pathologist?
Yes.
And at the time that you talked to Dr. Thompson, did you consider that you, as a forensic pathologist, had more expertise in determining the cause and manner of death than a person who was not a forensic pathologist?
Yes.
At the time you talked to...
No, I know bodies are not symmetrical, but you still can't have... The rakes will still be in a line. So there should be a line that's consistent. The problem is there's like 3 lines, and I think that's why they say she might have been hit 3 times. One of them is, I won't show it again because I can get in trouble with YouTube. But if you go back a little bit and look at the picture I put on the screen, you'll see there's like 2 lines and then 1 outlier. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Dr. Thompson, did he tell you whether he had any concerns about Miss Mullis's, the circumstances of Miss Mullis's death?
He told me, as I recall, that he had concerns about her injuries being non-accidental in nature.
And were those concerns that you as a forensic pathologist took with a grain of salt, since he was not a forensic pathologist?
I accepted them. I wasn't dismissive, I think, which is what that suggests. I heard them and said, I will see what I see at autopsy.
I know.
When you went, is it true then that when you went into the autopsy for Miss Mullis, that you had already received information that there was someone who had concerns about her death?
As we established, Dr. Thompson told me he had concerns.
So is it true then that you started with the thought in your mind that there was something concerning about Miss Mullis's death?
I had heard that someone else had concerns, yes, but I had not seen her yet.
Well, it was your testimony that you weren't dismissive of that, is that right?
Correct.
So you were considering that?
Right. I didn't hear it and then forget it. I remembered it and did the autopsy.
Did you hear any information before you went to conduct the autopsy that Miss Mullis's death was an accident?
Yes.
And where did you hear that from?
That came from Dr. Thompson, who said that, I believe, as I recall, that he was told that she fell on it, but he had concerns about her injuries. We also received intake phone calls, and to the best of my recollection, that was part of our intake phone call, that she may have fallen on the rake.
That was was it Dr. Thompson who was reporting that to you?
Most likely.
And what you heard from, is it true that what you heard from Dr. Thompson was that he was concerned that it was reported that she fell, but he was seeing injuries that he found concerning in that context?
He thought her injuries seemed inconsistent with a fall.
After talking with Dr. Thompson,
We haven't heard any of the technical. We only had 1 witness today, and this case is 6 years old. So this is a trial to see if he should have a new trial, because he was found guilty back in 2019. His appeal was denied in 2020 or 2022, 2021 or 2022. This is a civil bench trial where we will hear evidence that the defense believes will show that there is reasonable. It would be reasonable to try the case again. we haven't had any of all of that information at all. We have heard nothing other than this lady talked to another judge and it took her 3 hours to do an autopsy. So I can't tell you anything about the depth of the wounds, the penetration of the wounds, the positioning. On the Discord, we will put in all the stuff that we'll find. But again, this we haven't heard anything.
Well, let me ask you this. Did you take any other information about Ms. Mullis's death into your autopsy other than your conversation with Dr. Thompson?
Their law enforcement attended
Yes.
the autopsy. I can't remember exactly what information I was provided, but
Yes.
I'm open to really any information before I perform my autopsy. I consider myself unbiased regardless of what I hear.
As to what you just said about considering your
If anyone want to see the pictures, it's on the Discord. Jemima had put him up there. I didn't follow the trial either. I just saw it today and thought it was weird that he was suing civilly to get a trial.
Well, apparently you have to meet some hurdles for this, so it's kind of interesting, and I'm glad you're doing it.
Yeah. And if you're one of RA's lovely guests who are here today, I think my Discord link should pop in a second if you want to go on the Discord and see the evidence.
yourself to be unbiased. Do you consider at the time you start an autopsy that information that you hear could give you implicit bias?
Could you be more specific?
Well, have you ever heard the term implicit bias before?
I have, and actually only in legal settings. And each time I say, can you be more specific? Can
Well,
tell me what
what-
you mean by it.
Do you have an understanding of what that term means to you?
I think I do, but I actually worry maybe it is incorrect. So you can tell me, that would be great.
Well, I'm not allowed to answer questions from you. I'm sorry. I'm asking you questions. So I'm asking you what your understanding of the term implicit bias is.
I suppose I don't have a strong understanding of it.
Okay. Do you, well, let me come back to that. I want to ask you this. You said that you were open to hearing, and I don't want to misstate your testimony, but was it your testimony that you were open to hearing information about a case before you began an autopsy? I just want to make sure I understood your testimony about that. So I apologize if I misstated it.
Oh, I'm sorry, what was the question?
Sure. I want to make sure I didn't misstate your prior testimony. Was it your testimony that you were open to hearing additional information related to an autopsy that you conducted?
Yes.
And why were you open to hearing additional information related to an autopsy that you conducted?
Investigative information can be helpful. I do not perform an autopsy in a vacuum, and I think I possess the capabilities to take each bit of information individually and use it if it's appropriate.
When you began Ms. Mullis's autopsy, the information you had about her death came from your short phone call with Dr. Craig Thompson. Is that right?
Most of the information I had was from Dr. Thompson. He's the investigating medical examiner.
And you said most of the information. At the time that you started the autopsy, what information did you have about Ms. Mullis's death that did not come from Dr. Craig Thompson?
Travis Hemosath was there. I don't remember if he provided any extra information. Essentially, the information is Ms. Mullis was purported to have fallen on the corn rake, and then Dr. Thompson said that he was concerned that her injuries did not match a fall on a corn rake.
Did you talk with Deputy Hemosath before you began Ms. Mullis's autopsy?
Yes.
How long did you talk to him for before you began the autopsy?
I do not recall.
Did you have information from any other source before you began the autopsy, other than your conversation with Dr. Thompson and your conversation with Deputy Hemosath?
Not that I can recall at this time.
Now, you mentioned earlier that Deputy Hemosath was in the autopsy of Ms. Mullis with you.
Yes.
Was anyone else in the autopsy with you besides your assistant and Deputy Hemosath and you?
I don't recall. Sometimes I can have law enforcement on multiple cases. I can't say confidently whether or not other people were in the room. There are multiple autopsy technicians as well when I'm doing multiple cases, but no one else relating to the case.
Well, and you said that you have more than one autopsy going on at a time. Is it possible that while you were conducting Ms. Mullis's autopsy, that there were actually other law enforcement officers not even related to this investigation that were also there for the autopsy while you were doing this one?
They would be there for a different autopsy and not involved in Ms. Mullis's autopsy.
Well, they're standing, in that situation, are they standing in the same room with you?
They're standing in the same autopsy suite potentially. We have different areas for people to stand, different stations for the autopsy. They're separated in that manner. They could also be looking through a window. I simply don't remember. But I do remember that the only person I spoke to from a law enforcement standpoint during the autopsy was Travis Hemesath.
You have a clear, is it true that you have a clear memory as you sit here today of only speaking to Deputy Hemesath during this deposition and no one else? Or during this autopsy and no one else?
During the autopsy itself?
Yes.
Other people would be within my office, potentially. We have an investigator on the case, the autopsy technician. I don't recall speaking to anyone else about Ms. Mullis during the autopsy, no.
And the autopsy suite that you're describing, is it an open room with more than one table in it for where the bodies sit for the autopsy?
It's fairly open, yes, and there are multiple tables.
How far apart are the tables?
I don't know.
Are they further apart than 3 feet?
Yes?
Are they further apart than 10 feet?
I'm not entirely sure. You'd have to ask somebody with a tape measure to go and measure them.
Was Deputy Hemesath standing near Ms. Mullis's, where Ms. Mullis's body was during the autopsy?
As far as I recall, yes.
Is it correct that he wasn't looking through glass?
Correct.
To make sure that I understand the order of what occurred, am I correct that you had information from Dr.
I've been thinking the same thing for the last half hour. I feel we know her from another case, but I can't remember any other Iowa cases we've been covering.
It was either the guy that offed his girlfriend. That was Iowa. Was she from that one? Because I was thinking the same thing.
The guy who offed his girlfriend, Jamie. We've been doing this for 2.5 years. Do you know how many guys offing?
The guy
girlfriends?
that got the machete with his friend and kidnapped her and took her out.
Oh, the drug
By
house.
the lake.
By the lake.
Um,
The short
She
bus
was
case.
the slow, yeah, jeez, I'm trying to say it without being so mean. But yeah, with all the crazy characters.
I still don't know what that stepdad did, but I don't like him.
Yeah, Alan.
Yeah, Alan. I've said enough about him.
I think she was in
No,
that
she
one.
wasn't in that. Was it Iowa the lady who drove over her husband? No, that was
No.
Wisconsin.
That's Wisconsin. The only ones I can think of from Iowa is that one, or I don't think we've done many actually. from
Yeah,
Iowa.
Iowa is. I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but I've been thinking about it.
Mhm.
Dr. Thompson, you spoke briefly with Deputy Hemesath before this autopsy. You talked with Deputy Hemesath during this autopsy, and then at the conclusion of this autopsy, you made your findings.
Yes.
There is no requirement that let me ask you the question this way. Is there any requirement that at the conclusion of an autopsy, you as a forensic pathologist have to make your cause and manner of death determination right then?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
It's true that there's absolutely no requirement that that occur. Is that right?
Not that I'm aware of.
And it's your testimony that you are open to more information related to a case. Is that right?
Always.
In this particular case, did you seek any other information between the end of the autopsy and when you made your finding at the conclusion of the autopsy that the cause and manner of Ms. Mullis's death was homicide?
So in between when the autopsy was complete and when I said it was homicide? to be
That's right.
clear, I did not. Is there an example of what I could have done? I finished the autopsy and I said it was homicide.
And you asked about examples. That is what I want to ask you about. I mean, given that you are open to, well, I want to get to the issue that you just raised, but I want to go back to one thing for just a moment. Do law enforcement officers come to every autopsy that you perform as a forensic pathologist?
No.
Did you draw any significance from the fact that Deputy Hemesath was at this one?
No.
how long of a drive is it from where Deputy Hemesath worked as a law enforcement officer to where you did this autopsy?
I don't know.
Was it your understanding that Deputy Hemesath was a law enforcement officer in the community that we're in today?
Yes.
How long of a drive is it from here to where you did this
Yes,
autopsy?
he has a different.
I believe it's about 3 hours.
Is it your testimony that you drew no conclusions from the fact that Deputy Hemesath drove 3 hours to be at this autopsy with you?
No, we have been.
Yeah, that's her name, Kelly Cruz, or Kraus. That's probably how you say it in English. Kruse in Danish. I have a buddy named Kruse.
Many people visit, some just come for educational purposes. I encourage it. I think it's important for people who deal with death understand what an autopsy is like.
When you talked with Dr. Hemesath or Deputy Hemesath at this deposition, at this autopsy, Dr. Cruz, did he tell you that he was there for educational purposes?
Not that I recall.
I mean, did he tell you he was there to investigate Ms. Mullis' death?
He did.
It was not your understanding at the time of this autopsy he was there to educate himself about your process.
Well, he may have expressed it, and I didn't remember. I'm just saying people drive a long ways to see an autopsy pretty regularly.
Had you ever had Deputy Hemesath at an autopsy with you before this one?
Not that I recall.
During this autopsy, did Deputy Hemesath tell you his understanding of how Ms. Mullis had been found in terms of the position that she was found with the corn rake in her that led to her getting medical treatment in this case?
Yes.
What did he tell you during the autopsy about that issue, the position of the rake in her body?
I was told that she was essentially face down and the rake was sticking out of her back. I believe at that time, and I've been told subsequently, that 2 tines were said to have been inside her body and 2 tines were outside of her body when she was found.
During the autopsy, did Deputy Hemesath tell you that Ms. Mullis had been found with the corn rake in her back, with the handle of the corn rake facing toward her head?
That does sound familiar. I'd have to go back and look. That's how I envision it when I think back.
And to make sure we're talking about the same thing, we understand that she wasn't found in a sitting up position, but I'm not going to get down on the ground for this purpose. But understanding that sitting here today, I'm not in the position that Deputy Hemesath said she'd been found in. Where would the handle of the corn rake have been relative to my body from your understanding of what Deputy Hemesath was describing?
The way you had just described it, I would envision the rake handle poking up toward the head.
Am I correct that given what Deputy Hemesath was describing to you, he was describing the corn rake handle extending from her back up over her head?
Yes.
And we agree that she wasn't in an upright position, but just to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
Yes.
We're talking about the corn rake coming up this way, correct?
Yes.
All right. As you sit here, well, let me ask you this. At the time of your deposition in 2023, was that your understanding of how she had been found?
Yes.
Was that your understanding at the time of your autopsy?
Yes.
As of the time of your deposition in 2023, had anyone ever told you that that was not how she was found?
Not that I recall.
Did you base your opinions in this case on an understanding that at the time that Ms. Mullis was found, the handle of the corn rake was extending up over her head?
No.
And when you say no, can you explain to me what you mean by that?
How someone said they found the rake, the position of the handle, the position of her body, the rake was removed from her body. If I saw the corn rake like that, then maybe I could take it into consideration, but a simple description such as that had no bearing on my determination and was unnecessary to make the determination of homicide.
Why was it unnecessary for your ability to determine whether this was a homicide to try to determine what position the rake was in at the time Ms. Mullis was found?
Ms. Mullis was impaled with the corn rake, and how the corn rake ended up in her doesn't really change the fact that it's homicide.
And I want to make sure that my
Well, it kind of does because
Yeah.
if it's not possible for anyone else to put it that way in her, then it couldn't be homicide.
Yeah, if they're saying that he swung it at her while she had her back to him, how would it
Yeah.
get that way?
She must be on her front, and then if it's going that way, that's a little. It's because it's a civil case and there's no jury. Now I'm putting on my thinking face.
Mhm.
And how an implement of unaliving is embedded into a body kind of has a big thing to do with if it's possible that it's unaliving or if it's an accident. But yeah, what do I know?
Question that I want to make sure I've asked my question in a clear way. And I'm going to ask with the court's permission, because I don't remember exactly how I worded it, is it possible for the court reporter to read the question back, Your Honor?
It is.
Thank you.
Why was it unnecessary for your ability to determine whether this was a homicide, to determine what? To try to determine what position the rake was in at the time Miss Mullis was found?
Is the answer, was that your understanding of my question when you gave the answer you just gave?
Yes.
Am I correct that it was not important to you to understand the position that the corn rake was in at the time Miss Mullis was found?
I would need more information to consider it, such as what injuries were associated with that corn rake in the position in which it were found, if you follow.
Well, at the time of
But isn't that why you're doing
Isn't-
the autopsy,
yeah.
to find out the positioning of the implement and how it got there?
Yeah,
I'm
how is she fighting this? Because that's a big part of your determination.
Yeah, that's actually your job, to figure out if it is one of 5 things: self-deletion, accident, unaliving, natural. I can't remember the last one. But she claims it's red rum, but she didn't
Undetermined.
care about. Yeah, I don't need to figure out how it happened.
I don't need to know what position the rake was in.
Yeah, I don't understand.
your autopsy, what you were doing was looking at her injuries and trying to understand what those injuries were. Is that correct?
Well, I could
Test
tell
it
what
out
her
for us,
injuries
baby.
were.
Was the purpose of your autopsy to assess what her injuries were?
Yes.
And so
Yeah, I know it could have happened that way if she was crawling towards him, but it's kind of. I just don't get why an ME doesn't find it interesting in what position it's, because it's also a curved blade, so you can tell by the way the curvature of, and that's the thing. If it curves different directions, then you can say, well, she must have been moved.
when you say that you would need more information, would it have assisted
yes.
your analysis of whether or not Miss Mullis, the manner of Miss Mullis's death was a homicide, to understand the position that the rake was in relative to her body when she was found with the rake in her?
No.
But why?
Yeah, why? Give me a reason why it's not important.
Yeah. Explain to me why that's not important.
We've been talking about your conversation with Deputy Hemesath at the time of.
Thank you, Nina Canadian. It was in the
Yeah.
Luzma. We have seen her before.
Yeah. I know she's so familiar.
I'm demented, but not too much.
The autopsy. And during your conversation with Deputy Hemesath during the autopsy, did you discuss with him the possibility of this being, of Miss Mullis's injuries being the result of a fall?
We did discuss how they were not the result of a fall.
Well, during the autopsy itself, before you had finished the autopsy, did you tell Deputy Hemesath that it was your opinion that the injuries that you observed during the autopsy were not the result of a fall?
I told him definitively at the end, and he had asked, and we discussed that they were allegedly from a fall, and he asked me, could they be from a fall? And I said no.
Was it your opinion that these injuries weren't from a fall, even before you finished looking at Miss Mullis's body?
It was determined at the end of the autopsy. Much of the examination is that external examination that begins the entire process. So I had pretty clear idea before the internal examination began, and did not issue a final opinion until the end. But I was certain at the beginning that it was a homicide, and everything else within my autopsy supported that. I remained open
Why?
throughout and found no evidence to the contrary.
Did you determine that Ms. Mullis's injuries were a homicide before you did your internal examination of her body?
Homicide was the manner of choice at that time. However, as I said, I remained open and found no evidence to the contrary.
Why could you not, by any means, feel like there was an accident? I don't get it.
Well, because she was told, and then she looked at it, and it made sense.
While you were conducting the
other
autopsy
one you
with
were wrong.
Deputy
justify
Hemosath
it.
present,
We all do that.
did he ask you if he could bring the corn rake into the autopsy to assist in an analysis of this case?
He asked if he could bring the corn rake closer to Miss Mullis and her clothing items. I said I preferred to keep them separate. The corn rake itself was within the autopsy suite, which is rather large, for the purpose of photographing it. The corn rake did not come in contact with Miss Mullis during the autopsy.
During the autopsy, did you photograph the corn rake?
Yes.
During the autopsy, did you compare the corn rake directly with the injuries on Miss Mullis's body?
I examined each separately. As I had said, I did not put them close together, but I examined them separately and within a very small time period.
How far apart were the tines on the corn rake?
I would have to check my notes. I don't quite remember.
Which notes would you like to check to answer that question?
No, she didn't measure it.
I guess I would have to go back at the photographs because I did not put that in my actual written notes or in my autopsy report.
Was it important to your analysis to know how far apart the tines of the corn rake were?
It was information to consider. Like I said, there had been no information to suggest that anything other than the corn rake caused her injuries. There are some inherent difficulties in comparing a fixed object with the human body, which is malleable and can contort into different positions. So taking straight measurements from an object and comparing them directly with the body is fraught with issues. But measurements such as that are important just to have every bit of evidence possible.
Is there a reason, if it was important for you to have those measurements, that you didn't document them in your notes or your report?
They were documented with photographs, and I can't recall why I didn't simply write it down.
But the picture I showed was the side of the rake. It wasn't between the thongs or the teeth or whatever you call it on the rake. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't that be quite to see if...
You talked about, during your autopsy, conducting both an internal examination and an external examination of Miss Mullis's body. And I want to ask you, just as to the external examination, you examined...
it's a thing most women have. They can't hear men.
Well, during the autopsy, did you examine her face and her head?
Yes.
Did you examine the front of her chest?
Yes.
Did you examine her hands?
Yes.
Did you examine her knees?
Yes.
And I think you told us a minute ago that you did examine, you had the clothing that she'd been wearing accessible.
Lolita smiles. I can't say I have, but I won't put it on screen.
To you at the autopsy as well.
Yes.
What was your understanding of what clothing she'd been wearing that would have covered the top half of her body at the time that she experienced these injuries?
I know on the outer layer she was wearing a thick jacket, and I believe she had 2 additional layers of clothing on top.
At the time that you conducted the autopsy, did you look at Ms. Mullis's clothing for any holes?
Yes.
Why did you do that?
The holes were actually quite obvious when we photographed them. It's within our standard procedure to photograph clothing as it is received. So I make note of everything I see.
How many holes did you see on Ms. Mullis's coat at autopsy?
I saw multiple holes. I did not count them.
Why wouldn't you?
Were the holes in her clothing important information to help you determine what the cause and manner of her death were?
No.
It would be an important piece, lady.
Did you photograph her clothing during the autopsy with the holes that you'd observed in the clothing marked?
Yes.
Did you take, well, I'm actually going to show you, at this moment, Your Honor, I'm going to show the witness exhibit 524. Is that being displayed?
Yes.
She has it now, yes.
You've been shown, Dr. Cruz, what's been marked as exhibit 524. Do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes.
What is it?
It's an autopsy photograph. This is of Miss Mullis's jacket. It has a ruler with our state medical examiner number on it and a number of arrows that point to.
I'm baffled by this testimony. I don't know why. I didn't measure it. You don't need to measure it because the body is malleable. Did you count it? Couldn't be my problem. I took a photo.
Well, she had the nerve to say, there was multiple holes, but you didn't count them? No. Well, what's multiple?
Yeah.
I mean, come
Yeah,
on.
she probably should have done her job a little bit better.
Yeah.
No, we have had her before, and I don't remember her being this sloppy in the Louis Ma case.
Yeah.
But
No.
I don't know. Probably not. Don't need to.
Defects in the clothing.
Does exhibit 24?
Yeah. She went in there, looked at it, and said, "I know it's a homicide. Oh, it looks like a homicide." I was correct. It seemed like she put the cart in front of the horse. That she already agreed to herself that it must have been that, and then she just looked at all the evidence that proved that.
Yeah. And then
That's
she
not
was
what
like,
she
"Oh,
said
yep,
at
I
trial. In
solidified
trial,
my
she said
decision."
6. I just listened to it, trying to get evidence photos. So why did she change it? I don't. And
That was the whole thing is there's 6 in her actual skin, but 4 in the coat. So I think, that's obviously why they're bringing it in. So, but then she's not saying it. Yeah.
If you go back and look at that picture I put up, there was 5 holes.
Yeah. Where's the 6th one then?
Yeah, there was 5 holes and a scrape.
Accurately reflect the holes that you saw in the jacket at autopsy?
It accurately reflects what I saw at autopsy, yes.
Well, did you did you or your assistant put 4 large arrows on the 4 holes that you saw in the jacket to document those holes in this photograph?
Yes, my assistant did.
Was this photograph the only documentation of the holes that you saw? Let me ask this question again. Was this photograph, Exhibit 524, the only documentation that you made of the holes in Miss Mullis's jacket at autopsy?
There are other photographs. I can't recall if they have arrows or not.
Why are you fighting it?
Is it your testimony that there are, well, let me ask you this. Are there any other photographs with arrows marking the holes that you observed at autopsy?
I just said I don't recall.
We were talking about your conversation with Deputy Hemasath for a minute, and I believe it was your testimony that it did not matter to you what position the rake was in at the time Miss Mullis was found in terms of the ultimate cause and manner of death determinations that you made about Miss Mullis's death. Is that right?
What someone says in terms of the position, yes. I mean, that's taking someone's description at face value. So no, I did not take it into consideration and did not need to.
Well, did the information about how the rake was found in her body help you to make it clear what caused the injuries?
The fact that a rake was found in her body was helpful, yes.
Did it help you to determine which injuries Miss Mullis experienced in what order?
No.
Did it help you to determine, well, is it your testimony today that the fact that the rake was in her body in a certain way was not important to your assessment of the cause and manner of her death?
The fact that someone says they found the rake in a certain position was not something I considered or needed to consider.
At the conclusion of your autopsy, did you feel confident that Miss Mullis's death was a homicide?
Yes.
If you had not been confident at that time that Miss Mullis's death was a homicide, what would have been the appropriate finding in your case?
I would have pended the case for further review, investigative materials, etc.
And you did not pen the case at the conclusion of the autopsy?
Officially, I did on paper, but verbally, no, I did not. It was determined to be a homicide.
What?
Was the
I didn't pen it on paper, but verbally I did.
Well, she said she did pen it on paper, but
No, she didn't pin it on paper,
didn't.
but she verbally confirmed it. That's not how you do it in a report.
Yeah, I thought it was opposite. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know.
Did I get it totally wrong?
No, I mean.
And you did not pen the case at the conclusion of the autopsy?
You didn't pen the case on the conclusion of the
didn't pen.
autopsy.
Officially, I did on paper, but verbally, no, I did
No,
not. It
oh,
was
so on
determined
paper.
to be
Sorry,
a
I got it
homicide.
wrong. Thank you, Jamie.
No.
Was the reason that you penned the case on paper because law enforcement asked you to do that so that they could continue an investigation?
I don't have a recollection of if I was asked to. It's something I would have offered to do. It's pretty standard in our practice. We will withhold cause and manner of death so law enforcement can continue with their investigation so it doesn't jeopardize their investigation.
At the conclusion of this autopsy, was whatever was on paper, in your heart, this was not a pending investigation in terms of the cause and manner of her death. Is that right?
Yeah, in my brain, it was not pending.
All right. You did have one, well, let me ask you this. Did you have the toxicology request that was still outstanding at the conclusion of the autopsy.
Yes.
What type of toxicology request did you make at the end of this autopsy?
I ordered what we call a basic panel. It looks at drugs of abuse and alcohol.
Does this basic panel look for prescription medications beyond drugs of abuse?
No.
For Ms. Mullis's autopsy, could you have submitted a request for a toxicology panel that covered prescription medications other than drugs of abuse?
Yes, I could have.
Is that something you did?
No, I did not.
You told me a minute ago that you were open to, that you, in your general practice, are open to other information about your cases other than what you see and observe at autopsy. Is that right?
Yes.
At the time that you determined that Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide, did you want any context about where exactly her body had been found?
No.
Did you want any context at the time you determined this was a homicide about where on the Mullis property she had been found?
No.
Did you want any context at the time you determined this was a homicide about what the materials were, what the floor was made of in the area where she was found?
Out of all the information you provided, that would be the most interesting, because I do think she did sustain blunt force injuries that could be related to hitting the ground. So I think that information would be useful, yes. But it would not change my manner, I'm sorry.
At the conclusion of your autopsy, how did you know that it wouldn't change your opinion what surface she'd been found on if you didn't know what surface she was found on?
She was impaled in the back with a corn rake, so what she was standing on didn't really make a difference. But it's important to be able to understand all different sorts of wound patterns. And in addition to the injuries on her back that caused her death, she had some blunt force injuries.
Was it well, as to the blunt force injuries, at the time that you determined that Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide, did you know what had caused any of the injuries that you say were blunt force injuries on her body?
No blunt force. None of them had a pattern that could tell me definitively where they came from.
Is it true then that you did not need to understand what those blunt force injuries were in order to determine that Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide?
I did not need them, no.
I mean, is it true that those blunt force injuries then were not relevant to deciding whether or not Ms. Mullis was the victim of a homicide?
They were supportive, but not absolutely necessary for that determination, no.
Dr. Cruz, how could they be supportive if you didn't even know what caused them?
They were supportive, as I had said earlier. She sustained a number of puncture wounds to her back, suggested to be from a fall, which would make the manner of death an accident, which is seemingly the only other option than homicide. If someone falls backwards, they don't get injuries to the front of them. So that supported that she was impaled with the corn rake and did not fall backwards on it.
Is that the only reason in your mind that determining what caused the blunt force injuries wouldn't be relevant to your determination about whether or not this was a homicide?
I think relevant is misleading. It's important to document everything you see and not be dismissive of it. So I take my findings and I do my best to interpret them appropriately. Seeing an injury and then getting additional information as to what could have caused it is always helpful and important for every pathologist to take that into consideration. I did not need them to determine that her cause of death.
Yeah, if you walk, you fall off something and you stumble back. Let's get Bender on the job. You have the rake up against the wall. Someone put it the wrong way around, and you fall off, and it beds in you, and you fall forward. That could have left blunt force trauma. Again, there would be some problems with the positioning of the rake, but still, wouldn't you do it and then say, "There's no way I have determined by looking at it. There's no way this could have been from an accident where you fall up against a wall or something and gets embedded and fall forward. No, I just couldn't be.
Yeah, couldn't be. No.
Yeah.
Death was due to the sharp force injuries of her back. Her death was not due to blunt force injuries.
Was it possible in your mind at the time that you completed Ms. Mullis's autopsy that there could be an explanation for every single one of the blunt force injuries that you observed on her body that would explain that those injuries were caused by her everyday life or an accidental source or something that did not have to do with her being struck by, in your mind, struck by a corn rake?
Are you saying there are explanations like that for them?
I'm asking you, did you consider that possibility at the time you determined this was a homicide?
Blunt force injuries are difficult to interpret, so it's always important to consider that they could have come earlier in the day and may not have been associated with the injuries that caused someone's death. The sheer number of Ms. Mullis's injuries and the nature of them is highly suggestive that at least most of them are associated with her death.
Is that because of, in your mind, the number of other things you observed?
I've performed many autopsies, and the number of her injuries was substantial. And I do not think they were incurred during the course of her everyday life.
Well, at the time that you determined that Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide, did you take any steps to learn what the cause of any of the other, what you say were blunt force injuries on her body were?
As I stated, blunt force injuries can be difficult. None of them had a clear pattern to them. So you could take steps to postulate as to how they happened, but there's no way to know for sure. And to say you know exactly for sure how they happened is incorrect.
And Dr. Cruz, isn't it true you were taking steps to postulate how they happened by postulating that in your mind, because of the number of them, they must have been associated with her death?
Yeah.
I'm not saying exactly how they occurred, which is what you asked me.
But it was your testimony that because of the number of them, it was unlikely that they were injuries that occurred in the course of her everyday life. Wasn't that your testimony?
Yes.
So you were postulating that based on the number of them, even though you didn't know what they were caused by, they were related to her death.
That they were most likely related to her death, at least most of them.
So isn't it true that you were postulating what those injuries were without really having any understanding of why they were there?
I do not know exactly what caused them. However, in my...
Is she just talking in circles?
Yes.
I don't speculate on the injuries to her body. I speculate they must have happened in connection with her death. I don't speculate. It would be speculating, but it must have happened at that time. Seems really, really weird. Some people pick their noses, but I was born with mine. Thank you, Zach. 14 months. And Gwennon Garnett, how many people has this expert incarcerated? We have seen her in another trial, and she wasn't this bad in another trial. I just can't figure out what her testimony is.
Yeah, and how she doesn't know, she doesn't need to know any information. She doesn't need to know what did this. She just knows this woman has these marks. She passed away, and it must be, you know.
It must be her husband who did it, because it couldn't have happened. I don't know how it happened. I don't know if it happened. But the marks line up, but I don't have any opinion on the marks. But the marks clearly had to do with the unaliving. It just seems very weird.
Expertise, my medical opinion, those are not due to everyday life. And that's an important determination we need to make as forensic pathologists, because we often get cases, more often than not, when there's concern because someone has a number of injuries, then law enforcement may think that their death may be due to an injury. And we then determine if those injuries could be due to normal, everyday life. That's something that's standard to my practice, and I feel very comfortable doing that.
Did you have any way to distinguish at the time of Ms. Mullis's autopsy whether what you say were blunt force injuries on her body were...
When God was handing out noses, she thought he said roses and said, "Oh, give me a big red one." Sick.
or injuries that she experienced in a fall versus from some other source?
Like I said, you can't say exactly what it is. It could be from a fall, absolutely. Striking objects while falling, striking the ground, absolutely.
And if the blunt force injuries that you say you observed on her body during the autopsy are consistent with a fall, then how could any of those injuries be supportive of the idea that Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide?
The blunt force injuries are on the opposite side of her body to the other injuries. So either she fell forward or backward, you can pick one.
Is it true that at the time of Ms. Mullis's autopsy, that because you could not envision a circumstance in which Ms. Mullis sustained these injuries, other than someone impaling her with the corn rake, that is the reason you determined that this was a homicide?
There is no other way. Yes.
And that's your opinion based on the autopsy that you conducted and your conversations with Deputy Hemesack?
I'm not sure how my conversations with him helped me come to that conclusion. Without speaking to him, I would have come to that same conclusion at autopsy.
That would have been your conclusion based solely on what you observed at autopsy?
Yes.
And that's because you did not take any steps to learn any context about, for instance, what the surface of the floor was in the area where she was found?
I was able to make that determination without that information at that time, yes.
And you didn't seek that information out?
No, not at that time, no.
Did you need to know at the time that you determined that Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide, whether she had been found with her face resting on a surface for some period of time?
I was aware that her face was on the ground, and I am aware you have someone saying that her face was resting on the floor for such a period of time. She sustained a very large abraded contusion on her jaw. I don't think that's an appropriate explanation of that injury, especially given that she has additional injuries to the left side of her head, such as bruising to her left ear, bruising behind her left ear. But if that's what another forensic pathologist wants to say, then it still doesn't change my opinion.
Well, Dr. Cruz, that wasn't my question, was it? I mean, my question was whether at the time you determined that her death was a homicide, whether you had information at that point about whether her face had been resting on a surface.
I don't recall. I know that I was told that she was prone, so face down, so her face could have been resting. It's a possibility.
At the time you made your determinations, did you take any steps to learn that?
Where her face was?
Yes.
Not that I recall.
At the time that you determined that Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide, did you know where she had been injured?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure. At the time that you determined Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide, did you know where it was that she had been injured?
Meaning, location?
Not the location on her body, but the location in the world.
Yeah, I'm very body focused, if you haven't noticed. I was told she was injured on a farm.
Hey, all recovery addicts. Yes, I heard he had a meeting, but you are more than welcome here. We are, I don't know if you had the same over from Recovery Addict, but we are very confused with this lady who apparently did everything but didn't do it and didn't go into it with a predetermined conclusion, but did have a conclusion predetermined. I feel like we're just turning around in circles.
Arm in a shed.
Well, you were deposed in this case, isn't that right?
I was deposed twice.
You were deposed in this case in 2023?
Yes.
And isn't it... Do you recall being deposed in this case?
Yes.
Did you testify at your deposition in 2023 that you did not know where it was that she had experienced these injuries?
Correct.
So at the time you determined that her death was a homicide, you did not know where it was that she'd been injured?
No, I was told where she was found, and all that's just information from other people. I have absolutely no idea where she was injured.
At the conclusion of your autopsy in this case, did you certify the death certificate for Ms. Mullis?
I waited. That's that pending cause and manner. I eventually did certify it.
And I understand. I was not intending to imply that you did that immediately, but at some point after you completed the autopsy, did you certify the death certificate for Ms. Mullis?
Yes.
What does it mean to certify someone's death certificate?
A death certificate is a document that has a number of bits of information about a person. The part that I'm responsible for as the medical certifier include the cause of death, the manner of death, how injury occurred, and some other little bits of information. So to certify the death certificate means to place that information into an electronic record, and then I electronically sign it.
By certifying a death certificate, are you certifying that the information on the death certificate is accurate?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 354. Your Honor, we're going to show the witness what's been marked as Exhibit 354, and I'll just make a record that there is some personal identifying information on this record retrieved redacted, but otherwise this is a true and accurate copy of Exhibit 354.
Okay, the record will reflect that.
Are you seeing Exhibit 354?
Yes.
What is Exhibit 354?
This is Amy Lynn Mullis's death certificate.
Do you see that her birth date and her social security number are redacted?
I do see that, yes.
Other than those redactions, is Exhibit 354 a true and accurate copy of the death certificate that you certified as to Ms. Mullis's death?
That portion that I described that I certify, I can say yes. The decedent information portion is the responsibility of the funeral home, so I'm not necessarily comfortable saying that's true. I don't know where she lived.
Other than the decedent information section, did you complete the remainder of this death certificate?
Most of it, yes. Not that funeral home portion at the bottom, but really that central area.
Understood. Did you complete the portion of this death certificate that provides a medical cause of death?
Yes.
And what did you certify as the medical cause of death for Ms. Mullis?
Sharp force injuries of torso.
Is it your opinion in this case that the injuries that Ms. Mullis had on her
Thank you, Samantha Stevens.
torso were sharp force injuries?
Yes.
And this death certificate does this death certificate provide a space to explain what the injuries that you identify?
He is in jail. He has been in jail since he was found guilty and unaliving his wife back in 2019. Then in 2021 or 22, I can't remember, he got his appeal denied, and now this is a civil case where he believes that he will present enough new evidence that he should have his trial retried.
As the cause of death are due to or as a consequence of?
Yes, that's what it said. In this case, there really wouldn't be anything appropriate to put underneath that.
And why is that?
So sharp force injuries of torso are essentially, well, there are two components of the cause of death on a death certificate. There's the immediate cause of death, whatever condition, injury that ultimately led someone to die right away. That can be due to something else, which is called the underlying cause of death. That immediate cause of death sometimes can be so specific, it really doesn't belong on the death certificate, because ultimately a death certificate is for vital statistics purposes, tracking diseases, injury trends. So that underlying cause of death is really the most important, which is what I put. So the sharp force injuries of torso is that underlying cause of death. If you wanted to put something above it into immediate cause of death, like pneumothorax, something along those lines, you could. But in my opinion, in this case, the sharp force injuries of torso is perfectly sufficient for cause of death.
And did you identify in this certificate the immediate cause of death as you just described?
I did not. And in this case, with an injury that happens quickly like this, one could argue you're getting into mechanism of death territory, which we are instructed not to do by the CDC. So to me, her death was sharp force injuries of torso.
Did you include on this death certificate what the place of her injury was? And what did you say on Ms. Mullis's death certificate the place of her injury was?
Farm building.
Isn't it true that at the time, that by your testimony, at the time you determined the cause and manner of her death, you did not know in your mind where she'd been injured?
Yes.
At the time that you determined that Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide, did you want any context about what Ms. Mullis had been doing earlier that day?
Want is an interesting word. I do like having information about the circumstances surrounding the death, so sure, I would want more information.
Turn off your phones in court for.
Yeah, why are they gonna
Such as that.
At the time you determined that Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide, did you have any information about what Ms. Mullis had been doing earlier in the day that she was injured?
I believe I did. I believe she was working on the farm in some capacity.
Where did you get information about her working on the farm at the time that you determined that Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide?
That would be from law enforcement.
Isn't it true that that's not information you learned until after you had determined that this was a homicide?
I suppose I can't recall clearly. We received a lot of information in a short period of time, so it's definitely possible I learned it after, but it's a pretty simple bit of information. I don't think it would take too much digging to get that.
Well, in this case, Dr. Cruz, did you receive a lot of information in a short period of time before you determined that Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide?
I guess it's your opinion is that a lot of information. I had information about the circumstances surrounding her death. I didn't have finalized law enforcement reports, and as we established, I can't recall if I had her medical records or not. So I didn't have what one would consider a ton of information, but I didn't need it.
The only information you had at the time you determined this was a homicide was information that you saw at autopsy and that you got from talking with Deputy Hemosath and with Dr. Thompson, correct?
As far as I recall, yes.
And that was not a lot of information.
I suppose that's your opinion.
Well, I'm asking if, in your opinion, was it a lot of information?
Judge's been asking the answer, and she's also being argumentative at this point.
Sustained.
At the time that you determined that Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide, did you want any information about the prescription medications that Ms. Mullis was taking?
No, but I had it. Oh, I'm sorry, after the autopsy, I did get that information.
And to be clear, I'm asking about at the time you determined this was a homicide. At that time, you did not know anything about prescription medications that she was taking?
Not that I recall, no.
But she was recently operated on and probably was on some painkillers.
Yeah.
At the time that you determined that Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide, did you want any information about what emergency responders had observed when they provided her with medical aid?
I do want information about what emergency responders saw, and very much so about what they do, or what they did as part of their resuscitative efforts.
You testified a moment ago about being concerned in your testimony today about injuries that were on the front of Ms. Mullis's body. You know now that Ms. Mullis had resuscitative efforts on her way to the hospital, is that right?
Yes.
Did those resuscitative efforts include her receiving CPR?
Yes.
And did those resuscitative efforts include the use of something called a Lucas device?
Yes.
Can CPR and the use of a Lucas device bruise someone's chest?
Yes.
Is it common for those actions to bruise someone's chest?
Bruise or abrade the chest, yes.
And so the any blunt force injuries that you observed on Ms. Mullis's chest that were in the area where CPR is performed, are those injuries that you would expect to be associated with CPR?
It can be difficult if someone has injuries to begin with and CPR is performed in that same area, but I think it's reasonable to say that at least some of the injuries could be from CPR.
Well, in this particular case, would you as a forensic pathologist assume that injuries in that area would be connected with CPR?
I think it's most likely, and I did so. She had a sternal.
Welcome all recovery addicts. We are glad to have you, and we will take good care of you. If Zach sneaks up on you, just spray water on him, and he'll go back in his corner.
Fracture that I determined to be related to CPR.
And you mentioned this a moment ago. At the time that you determined that Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide, did you have any of her medical records from Regional Medical Center?
I do not recall.
It means that he believes he has enough evidence that the case should be tried over. So because he lost his appeal, or his appeal was denied, but they believe that there's enough new evidence that could give a different result, and that's why he is seeking this post-conviction relief to have it tried one more time. It's kind of an appeal, but in a civil suit. And hello, all raiders. Welcome all raiders. I know that you are up to date. We are probably a little ahead of us even, because we stop sometimes and have a talk. But welcome, and please sit down, relax, pull up the good chair. And if any one of you can understand why this lady keeps talking in circles and never really answering questions, please let me know. Because this lady, I feel her a little, I don't know, there's something off about her. And I know we saw her in the Louis Marr trial, and I didn't remember her being this evasive when she was testifying in that case. Thank you so much, DSN, for a wrecked super sticker.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen that one before. Thank you so much. But no, she seems weird. I can't put my hand on it, but
Well, there's a lot of stuff she left out, in my opinion.
yeah, and she has did you look at that? Nah, I don't feel like it, but I did look at it, but I didn't really write it down. That's yeah, and I didn't think it was important to look at her touch screen. Well, she just had an accident and she was talking about dizziness.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yes, maybe it's because her work is being questioned, but she's been questioned in every trial. I don't know. Dr. Bullbottle, like her a lot. I just find her talking in circles.
Yeah.
I don't know, but interesting. Would the touchscreen prove it's an accident? No, but it could be proving that she was dizzy because, well, they haven't talked about this, but in the first trial, her son testified that she had been feeling dizzy that day. And again, this is, of course, the defense.
Yeah.
What?
I said, and the son testified that he saw her like get dizzy.
Yeah.
And like,
so it could be because she had just had an operation, an out of office operation. So it's not a big evasive, but she could be on painkillers. I don't know how much it means. Red Pen, you will get a sticky note. Thank you so much.
yeah.
And Buck Dogger, 14 months. Thank you so much. And thank you to Recovery for sending all you lovely people over here. I probably have to slow down chat a little bit because we are a lot of people now.
Do you remember what day of the week you did Ms. Mullis's autopsy?
Yes.
What day of the week was it?
Monday.
And what day of the week was Ms. Mullis brought into Regional Medical Center?
It was a Saturday.
Isn't it true that you did not get Ms. Mullis's medical records until after you conducted the autopsy in this case?
I think that's the most likely scenario.
At the time you determined that Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide, had you talked with any biomechanical expert?
No.
At the time that you determined Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide, had you talked with any incident reconstruction expert?
No.
And thank you, Carol Engel, for becoming a member.
At the time that you determined that Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide, did you have an understanding of the angle of the wound paths on Ms. Mullis's torso?
Yes, I determined, well, the direction of the wound paths within the body. I did not have a specific angle.
At the time you determined that Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide, did you want to figure out the specific angle of the wound paths?
No.
At the time that you
Thank you, Bite Me, You Rock. Yeah, why don't you want to know? Because again, it could prove or disprove the story about how it happened. I don't know. Let's see.
determined that Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide, did you have in your mind of exactly how the corn rake entered her body?
She was impaled with it by another person.
And I understand that your opinion is that she was impaled by another person, but at the time you determined this was a homicide, did you have any understanding of how she was impaled?
Could you be more specific?
Sure. Did you have an understanding of whether the corn rake was swung into her body?
I did not, no.
Did you have an understanding of whether the corn rake was pushed into her body?
No.
Did you have any understanding of whether the corn rake entered her body in some other way by a person, in your opinion, causing it to enter her body?
It could have been swung, pushed, kicked. Someone else impaled her in the back with the corn rake multiple times.
Was it important to you at the time you determined this was a homicide to try to determine which of those routes this was?
That's not something I could do.
At the time you determined this was a homicide,
the thing we were talking about, I don't know where, because we don't really know what happened in that little, and the shed is very small. I don't know if I showed you the pictures, but if the rake was leaning against something and she fell back on it and then fell forward and slammed her head. But I have the autopsy pictures, the way the wounds are positioned on her body, I have a hard time seeing that happening accidental. It's it doesn't add up 100% in my mind.
did you want to understand why there had been blood found on Ms. Mullis's hand?
Did I? No.
At the time you determined this was a homicide, did you want to figure out why there was blood on the handle of the corn rake?
Want, again, is a hard word. I was aware that there was blood on the rake. I was told that she was found with a rake in her. To me, it supports the implement that caused.
But if you go and look at the autopsy photos, one of the holes are underneath her arm, and the five others are in her back. So I can understand where they believe the three are coming from.
Or injuries. So I already knew all that at autopsy.
At the time that you determined Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide, did you want to understand if there was some connection between the blood on the rake and the blood on her hand?
The blood on her hand has so many potential sources. As you yourself indicated, she receives CPR and pretty lengthy.
They are on my Discord server if you want to see the pictures.
Yeah.
Hey, Lisa.
CPR. I just don't know the nature of that blood, so to try and connect those two.
And it's free to join Discord. You might be asked, who are you on YouTube if you have a different name, just so people know who you are. But it's free to join. You don't have to be a member or anything. Is want really a hard word, Val? Spell want. I don't. What?
Would be inappropriate in my opinion.
Did you take any steps to learn the nature of that blood?
As I said, given all the events that followed Ms. Mullis being found, I don't think anyone could reasonably determine where that blood came from.
And you mentioned earlier that there's an issue in connection with a death where you have a cause and a manner and then also a mechanism. Is that right?
Yes.
What is a mechanism of death?
Mechanism, it's a really specific sort of derangement within the body that causes someone to die. It's discouraged in terms of putting it on the death certificate. Some examples that we see quite often are cardiac arrest. Someone's heart stops beating. Respiratory arrest. Someone stops breathing. Sure, those are ways people die, but really not a cause of death. What made their heart stop? What made them stop breathing? So the mechanism is that final thing of how you actually die, but a cause of death is what led to ultimately to that death.
And I understand your testimony that you did not need to list the mechanism of death on the death certificate, but at the time that you determined that Ms. Mullis's death was a homicide, did you know what the mechanism of her death was?
Yes.
Did you identify the mechanism of her death in your autopsy report?
No.
Did you identify the mechanism of her death in any of the reports that you prepared about your autopsy?
I did not say it explicitly. The description of her wounds from a medical standpoint, it's quite clear, but I did not explicitly state it, no.
What did you testify at Mr. Mullis's criminal trial in 2019 was the cause of Ms. Mullis's death?
Sharp force injuries of torso.
And what did you testify at his criminal trial was the mechanism of?
Yeah, and we have to remember, this is the second witness. There are allegedly 40 witnesses being called. So right now we are speculating based on what happened at the first trial, what we read in a newspaper. Let's see where they're going, because so far, yeah, I can see how the son story kind of gives him an alibi, but I've also seen the autopsy photos, and it's kind of, that makes it a little harder for me, but it also looks like this lady started her investigation with the purpose of finding out it's murder. So it's hard to determine yet. It should be a 10-day trial, so we have time to figure out what's up, what's down, and if he needs another trial.
Ms. Mullis's death.
As far as I recall, it's the chest cavity being compromised by the corn rake tines entering into it, which caused entry of air and some blood leakage into the cavity, albeit not that much. She also had direct injury to her organs.
In that testimony in Mr. Mullis's criminal trial, did you identify which side of her chest had air entering into it as you just described?
Looking back, I believe I had only said the right side, but obviously the corn rake tines also entered into the left side of the chest. That would introduce air into both sides of the chest, some blood, and then only on the right side did she have actual injury to organs, and then on the right side of the abdomen as well.
Have you looked back at your criminal trial testimony since the time of the trial?
Yes.
Is your testimony at Mr. Mullis's criminal trial about the mechanism of her death wrong?
It isn't comprehensive, I would say. I was focused on the direct injuries to organs on the right side of the body. I described how air enters into the chest cavities. So I said right, when in reality it should have been both chest cavities. I did explain quite thoroughly how there was injury to the left side of the chest as well. So it was implied but not stated explicitly.
Was it important to you in testifying at Mr. Mullis's criminal trial to be correct about the mechanism of Ms. Mullis's death?
I would like to have been, yes.
Do you agree with me that your description, even by your account today, of what the mechanism of her death was incomplete?
I'd have to look at my wording if I said this is the exact mechanism of death to see if it was truly incomplete or if I was just describing part of the way she died.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Maybe that's why he's trying to get this again. His original trial, his defense lawyer said, "We agree she was unalived. It just wasn't him." And he now claims that he didn't agree with that defense, and that's why we are doing this again, to say it was an accident. That's why this trial is going again. It's because his defense put on a defense he didn't want, which I think it's a long stretch to see if you're going to get. You better have a lot more than just an ME that maybe some of the points is a little bit shaky, but still it's not enough to sway anything. But the original case was someone did it, but it wasn't him. And he didn't agree with that defense strategy, according to the opening statements today.
Yeah.
And I'd like to show this. The criminal trial testimony for Mr. Mullis's criminal trial, volume 3, is exhibit one moment, Your Honor. I'm sorry, what is it? 349. Thank you so much. 349. And I'm going to refer the witness to page 98.
Yeah. It's
98.
It's a long day of a lot of nothing. Can you imagine how Harry must have been feeling when he had to translate that first lady with the speed talking? That must have been, you had your work cut out for you today, Harry.
Tell me when that's there. And let me ask you, would it refresh your memory to look at your trial testimony to recall exactly what you said?
I'd like that, yes, thank you.
I'm gonna, if the witness could read page 98, I know that's not up quite yet, and I'm gonna direct the witness to line 13 of page 98 through line 3 of page 99.
Yeah.
The bruising around it appears to be more pronounced, I think, in my autopsy photo. I don't know if there's anything else you're looking for.
Are there any other differences that you note?
It's darker in color, the bruising appears more pronounced, but it maintains its same general shape.
Ma'am, why does your report says the first who smelled it dealt it, and who is Dr. Hank R. Chief? You're getting worse, Zach.
When injuries on a person's body are exposed to air, can that lead to drying?
Yes.
And what does drying impact the appearance of abrasions, for instance, on someone's body?
Yes.
How can drying impact the appearance of abrasions?
Well, this is a good example. It changes the color of the wound, may change the size slightly. It doesn't really change much else. Experience helps you interpret them appropriately.
Well, does the injury to the chin on the photograph that you took at autopsy look more pronounced than the injury to the chin in the other photo?
The dark color from the drying makes it stand out more.
Is the injury to Ms. Mullis's chin that's depicted in the photographs or the photo?
I think we've seen this in most trials. Are you satisfied with your representation? But sadly, it seems you didn't do it in this one.
Photograph that you recognize of the two that are in front of you, is that injury consistent with a fall?
It could have occurred with a fall, yes.
And is there any evidence that the chin injury that's depicted in the photograph that you're looking at was caused by anything other than a fall?
There's no pattern within it that I can tell that tells me what caused it. So it's from the impact of an object with her body, and that object has a flat surface. So it could be the ground, it could be an object as she's in the process of falling the ground when she falls, or another object striking her while she's in another position.
In your testimony at Mr. Mullis's criminal trial, did you tell the jury that
Life without parole.
this injury to Ms. Mullis's chin was consistent with a fall?
I don't recall saying that, but I maintain that today is consistent with the fall. It's also consistent with any other type of blunt force injury.
Did anybody ask you at Ms. Mullis's trial whether this injury was consistent with a fall?
I would have to look at the transcript.
And we'll come back to that.
If you're on the Discord server, there is a room named, I'll just look it up. It's called Iowa v. Todd Docs. There's a little piggy on it. It's a current trial docket. And you can press that one and you go in and see every document that's related to this one. And below it, there's a chat where you can discuss this trial. The one with the dockets will be private, hopefully, so you can't write in it, but everyone can see it. And then you can discuss in the chat down below.
And I want to go back to her ears, because that's something that you mentioned earlier.
What we've seen so far.
And if you need to see some photographs of her ear to refresh your memory, I can show you that. But in your conversation with the investigators on November 14th of 2018, did you tell those investigators that any bruising around Ms. Mullis's ear could also be consistent with her falling?
I don't recall, but independently now I say, yes, it could be from a fall. She has earrings in, and she had bruising to the backs of her ears and on her earlobes, and that could be from her hitting the ground and the earring causing injury to her ear and the skin around her ear.
Could the bruising that you noted around Ms. Mullis's ear be consistent with bumping her head against some surface as she walked? For instance, hitting her, head on a door jamb as she walked through a door.
Yes.
Could it be consistent with banging her head on, some object hanging from the ceiling as she walked through a space?
If that injured her ear as well, then sure.
Is there any way to distinguish the bruising on her ear from someone's everyday activities?
It has the standard definition of a blunt force injury. I can't tell the nature of the injury, so it could be from sort of activity of daily living.
Did you tell investigators on this call on November 14th of 2018 that Ms. Mullis had a pretty low baseline hemoglobin?
I did say that, yes.
All right, and can having a pretty low baseline hemoglobin be something that can lead to anemia?
Well, that's what anemia is.
You're identifying that Ms. Mullis had anemia?
Yes, from the medical record, she was anemic.
No, she won't decide the appeal. She will determine if there's enough new evidence for an appeal, I believe.
Can anemia lead to dizziness?
Yes.
Can it lead to weakness?
Yes.
Can it lead to people falling?
Yes.
It is. It is, Your Honor.
Let's go ahead and take 15 minutes.
So, afternoon break. I don't know. I don't know much, but I know I love you. This is to bring in new evidence, and of course, what we have been doing for the last 2 hours is try to poke holes in the ME's report. But again, is it enough? That's always the. I've never seen a trial like this before. Only been doing this for 2.5 years, and I've never seen this happen. I think if any of you followed the Treehouse murder trial, the Tyrone Tucker trial, he also talked about he was going to go to civil court to prove he was innocent. And I don't know if it's the same thing he wanted to try and use, but as I understand this proceeding, they need enough new evidence to show that he should get an appeal. And we've heard an EMT talk about nothing. She arrived at the scene, they were giving him her first aid. That could explain the injuries or the blunt force trauma to at least her upper body, because they put on that machine. I can't remember the name. The CPR machine, and that goes to town. A lot of people don't understand how much force you actually have to use to give CPR. That's why you normally will switch between people, and now you have that machine that'll do it. But we also heard that the electrical thing that'll look for a rhythm it can shock into didn't find a rhythm, so there should have been some kind of heart rhythm. And I've just, what's consistent with an accident? Well, she puked. We have someone talked about her being dizzy and anemic. That could be she could have fallen, but again, the way, if we do this, the way her injuries were, I'm just gonna draw a generic torso. Her injuries were kind of like here, 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 and then on the side over here. Oh, that's not a good look. Let's make this smaller. So on the side under her arm, there was an injury, but then you also had 2 smaller injuries, something like this. And my problem with this is that if you are using a rake is linear. So shouldn't it be, these go one way, but these doesn't add up if you have a rake. And let's say she fell backwards, and I'm just speculating here. Let's try and do this. She's trying to get that cat thing down from up here. That's on top of something. And she's up, standing on some kind of stool. Can you see that? That's probably not the best color. She's standing on some kind of stool over here. Because they are stupid, they left the rake standing over here, and she falls backwards. That could explain one type of puncture. If she then falls forward, hits her head, and get injuries. But again, the pattern of the injuries would have to have her hit 2 times, and that's a problem. I have a hard time seeing it can be self-inflicted when you have, again, you have injuries to the back, the upper back on one side, and then across the middle of the back, and then 2 that goes up and down, and then 1 under the arm. Because a rake is a flat line. It's not. I have a hard time seeing how you can fall on it and get those type of injuries. Again, the pictures is in the Discord. Yes, Lawn and Crim have it, and Trial TV Live replayed it like 2 weeks ago, I believe, if you want to go support someone else than Lawn and Crim. It looks more like an ice pick did the punctures. Blood on the corn rake could have been planted after the fact. Just speculating. We're all just speculating. We don't know. The one under the arm is weird to me. Ralphie can see a scenario. It's just if you only, and there's only 4 holes in her hoodie. But of course you can pull the hoodie out without taking the prongs out of the hoodie. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, the angles doesn't add up. Wow, well, you have to go back and look. The tines on the rake are curved. Maybe they came out under her arm. No, because didn't they say they were all? And did everyone puncture her front, or was it only 2 of them that? Or did they puncture her front? I was a little bit. I didn't quite catch it with the EMTs, because the EMT said she didn't really see any injuries, but she know there was blood there. But she had her shirt on, so we saw the rake and it wasn't bent. No. Well, it is kind of bent, but not in a way that would make sense that it could make holes across the back instead of that's. And it's a small hoe as well. I don't know. And it's a very, very small area, and it's here on the ground, but she was found on her hands and knees with the rake apparently protruding above her head. And to me that, yeah, if it was placed here on the ground, can I embiggen this a bit? If it was laying here on the ground and she was falling backwards, but how would she fall backwards without hitting the wall if she was down here to try and get that cat crate? I don't know. I don't know. It's a weird one. I can show this one too. Yeah. Apparently, this is how it was placed. So I don't know. I don't know. It's a weird case. Just no. That's no bloody nothing. So. Oh, apparently, according to Jess, the one under the arm was for medical intervention. At least that's what they said in trial. Okay, so that's probably to try and combat that her chest cavity was punctured and air was getting in there, because it's not good for you to get air in your chest cavity, which is funny because that's where your lungs are. But it's not really that good for your chest cavity to have air in it. And how, if it only enters one time, how can it make 5 or 6 holes? Because if that one under the arm is out, then there's only 5 holes, but we were told there were 6 holes. No, we haven't heard the new evidence. Hey, Colorado Mountain Girl. So good to see you. You don't think he did it, man? Yeah, it's probably a chest tube to try and get so the lungs won't collapse. The prosecutor said he stabulated her with the rake, and that is how she died. Yeah. Yeah, that's what they said, but if you look, again, I have showed it earlier, but I don't think YouTube will love too much that I show autopsy photos. But they are in 2 different patterns, at least. And that's why I'm saying, yeah, that could be some kind of reasonable doubt, but again, have they, I don't know if there's enough new stuff here. So, I'm so sorry about that Marlon person. He's one of my students, and he saw the channel I had on, so he got in to be a jerk. I don't know who Marlon is. If I didn't see him, no big problem. Yeah, it's probably the chest tube. Now everyone is saying it. It looks like a chest tube. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but if you look at the autopsy photo, and that's reality. It's not what anyone drew on a piece of paper. I see 5 holes and a scratch, but I see at least 2 different patterns, and I don't know. Hopefully. I didn't watch the first trial. I don't know if it's the same team. One punctured her breast implant. Oh my. Oh my. Is there a link for the Discord info? If you are on the Discord, it's called Iowa v. Todd Mullis, and it has a little pic on it. And Jemima uploads all the pictures in there. So you can see pictures of her shirt, you can see pictures of her back, and some of the other injuries to the body, and the rake and the position in the little shed. Hey, Wristband. Welcome. And I hope he's having a great meeting with YouTube, and they say, hey, let's have you as a spokesperson, because then I know one of the spokespeople. One whole tine went in, flexed, and came out enough to flex back, scratched, and went back in another hole. But well, I can't tell, but it's just a very, very long way between each other. That's my only problem. Is it looks like it's 2 different patterns. So I can see why people would believe that it could be inside her twice. Oh, those tines are very far apart. It looks like they're very far apart. That doesn't really line up with the 2 little ones. Yeah, they're very, very far apart. No, it doesn't really make sense if you look at the pictures. And I know, well, the body is malleable and all of that, but that's just, it looks like that at least one that's kind of this way and one that's kind of that way. So I don't know. You just see dates on the Discord. I don't have any dates on the Discord. Did you go down in the one called current trial docket? That's where we have all the new trials. Oh yeah, he could do that. Just sponsor him and have them read them on trials. Give him some money. Has everyone seen this type of rake? Well, I've shown it a couple of times. I've seen it, but I don't. You don't have it in your garden. I don't. I have a smaller one, but that's on long. That's more to just break all the weeds out. I don't know how flexible it is. It's also called a 4-tine drake rake. I don't know. A small wound could have been left when the rake was being removed. It would be difficult to put it out and from her clothes without causing more wounds. Yeah, but I don't know. Well, where were you in 2018 when this happened? Just asking. Tines are not flexible. No, shouldn't they be? Because the only thing I have that kind of looks like this is the one where when you really want to have all the weeds out, you can really, like, kind of like, not a cultivator, but a little bit like a cultivator. Yeah, but I just don't understand how you can have 4 prongs and you have 2 wounds in the middle of the back that goes in a vertical. Is that vertical? I don't know. In that direction without having. I don't know. It's interesting to see where we're going to go, but so far, I don't really have an idea what they believe proves he didn't do it. Oh yeah, and if you're new on the Discord, we don't have an automatic. We have the mods accepting you, so it might take a second or two before you're able to see all the rooms. But thank you for joining the Discord, because Marissa likes to work. It's a pitchfork, but the tines are curved. No, they are having their afternoon break, 15 minutes. Is it possible the smaller holes was from a hesitation wound and the larger ones through and through and done with a simple tool like an ice pick? She fought back. I don't know. My ice picking people in the back days are long gone, so I don't know how it looks. I just find it, if you're claiming it's the rake, because the injuries are down here on the back, then I can't see how you can only get 2 of them. Then you would have to. Sorry for all you new people here. I'm very visual learning, so I'm trying to. That's why I have Mr. Bender here to try and get me to understand how things happen. And that middle of the back part, I have a hard time seeing both of them can be, yeah. Anyone wants to? Hesitation is a viable theory. Could be. Meant for dislodging. Yeah. Your vote is still. Come on. Your vote is still accident. Could be. I don't know. We don't know. I didn't watch the first trial, so I don't know any of the affair guys. And the only thing I noticed when I watched that, I was reading the report from the 48 minutes earlier. And apparently she had an affair again that her husband didn't know about, but that was his motive for doing it. And that confused me to all hell. Because if he didn't know about it, why would that be a motive? But maybe they had written that wrong. Thank you, Katharina Hetherington. That's a cool name. Thank you for becoming a member. Katrina, not Katharina. Hetherington. 1 memberships. Hey, Kimbers. He had a meeting, so you have to... you're getting the discount version today. I know. Not nearly as good. I'm the off-brand of Team News thing that you get if you ordered Recovery Addict. Then you have the Temu version, and then you have the version that's worse than Temu, and that's me. But good to see you back, Kimbers. Yeah, but then he had talked to that guy's wife, and she had said, no, everything is fine. And he didn't see, he just saw that there was 125 or 148 text between them, but he never saw what's in the text. And that's why I found it so weird when I read it. Either he knows about it and that's his motive, or he doesn't know about it. You never... It could be someone who miswrote something in an article. It's, again, there's a little piggy next to it, but maybe they haven't gotten around to, you have to have a role called Muffin Tops to see everything there. Could be, that's why. Oh, you're so sweet. How does defendant look tan for being in prison? How can you be tanned in Iowa at this time of year? Isn't it as cold as it is here in Denmark? What? Who? Thank you. And no, I haven't muted it.
In terms of what was said at that conversation.
I don't have an actual recollection of the conversation itself. Kathy Madison is an excellent investigator in our office, and I trust what she wrote here.
You have no reason to doubt that those notes are correct, is that right?
Correct.
Do you see that there's some entries in Exhibit 201? And
No, they're claiming now it wasn't an assault. This trial is because he claims it was an accident, but his defense in the first trial, without his approval, called it an assault. So, but yes, his son was with him. And thank you so much, Holly Mack, for another 5 gifted membership to Grace Giski, maybe, Melpoy, Selena K, and Kathy Davis, and SFNX Texas. Congratulations. Thank you, Holly Mack.
direct your attention down to an entry from 11/30 of 2018 that's on page 2. Do you see that there's some entries that have a KK next to them?
Yes.
Are those entries that you made in the case log notes?
Yes.
So do you have access to the case log notes for cases, just like other members of your staff?
Yes.
How do you keep these case log notes in terms of what kind of document?
It's
Oh, someone mentioned she was getting ready to get a divorce. Did he know about? I didn't watch the first trial. Did he know that she was telling her friends she was getting a divorce? Because none of the articles I've seen really mentioned it, but they just mentioned if they were getting a divorce, it could lose him the farm because they would have to share it. But did he know that she wanted a divorce? I think, again, I've only read a few articles, and it hasn't been provided today. Some of you watched the first trial. And thank you, Show Life Creations, for another 5 memberships to Carol C., Martha Evie, Fire Girl, Handmade by Wendy, DK Cripple, and Tispelea Ellie.
digital.
Are these kept as a Word document?
No, we have, it's our sort of medical management system
Oh, that takes away that whole... Okay, thank you, Stacy.
that holds information about decedents in our office and has a space for us to write notes.
Is Exhibit 201 a complete and accurate copy of all of the case log notes that your office kept about Ms. Mullis's autopsy?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay. I also want to show you Exhibit 380. And while we're pulling up Exhibit 380 for you, as part of your autopsy of Ms. Mullis, did you measure the depths of the wounds in her back that we've been discussing?
Yes.
Did you, and we've talked that you photographed the outside of those wounds, is that right?
Yes.
Did you photograph?
We don't know what medication she was on. I don't believe has been mentioned today, maybe from the first case. But she had an operation, and this was the first day she was out working after that. And just before the break, they were talking about her being anemic. And thank you, Squid Pro Quo from the raid. Welcome, Squid Pro Quoters. Squitters, maybe?
Did you or your staff take any photographs during Ms. Mullis's autopsy that would capture or reflect the wound paths inside Ms. Mullis's body?
Not of the organs or as they entered into the back of the body, no.
Do you agree with
I
me that
agree,
you and
as a
your
fellow
staff took
internet
only
moron.
2 photographs of the inside of Ms. Mullis's chest during this autopsy?
Yes.
And do you agree with me that those 2 photographs don't really show the wound path inside Ms. Mullis's chest?
Correct.
They're just in the way that her body was autopsied. There's some portions of her body that are really obscuring her chest in those photographs. Do you agree?
Yes, her ribs.
All right. I'm going to now show you Exhibit 380.
It's annoying we don't see it. Buck Dogger with another 5 memberships from Connie Marie, maybe. Mama Buck. Buck Dogger to Mama Buck. Charlie Lynn, Judy Basteri, and Hospice Jess. Oh, we haven't seen Hospice Jess in a while. Thank you so much, Buck Dogger.
Is that in front of you?
Yes.
And if you need to have us scroll down, we'll do so. But do you recognize Exhibit 380 to be a true and accurate copy of the postmortem examination notes for your autopsy of Ms. Mullis?
Yes.
I'm going to direct your attention to page
Welcome.
3. Does page 3 have some?
It could be, if you just get into the waiting, if you hit the Discord, the mods are working overtime because there's a big influx right now, and I don't have it automated just so we have, because it's not a paid to play Discord, just so we know people coming in, and you've seen some cases gets a lot of stupid people hanging around, so it could take you a little while till the Discord approves you.
Exemplars of the human body on which you've taken notes?
Yes.
Is this your handwriting on page 3?
Yes.
And
Oh, I'm sorry. At the top with her name, that's not my handwriting, but everything around the body is.
I appreciate that clarification. Page 3 is page 3 your notations at the autopsy of things of note?
The sticky notes. If you watch when I get a super chat or I get gifted memberships, I put down what I'm getting and I'll put it on my wall of thanks, because then every time I walk into my studio, I remind myself that I have to work harder because people have been generous enough to support my streams. I'll pull it up and I'll say thank you and all of that, but just to remind me that some people are very generous and support us YouTubers, I have this system where it's kind of like an extra little thank you and a big reminder that we are lucky that you want to spend time with us, so we better bring our A game when we go live.
That you observed during the autopsy.
Yes.
And does page 3 capture all of the defects in Ms. Mullis's body that you appreciated during autopsy?
No.
Is it your testimony that there's some defects that you, well, let me ask you this question. I'm going to have you turn to page 4.
Thank you, Lisa Olsen. No comment, but...
What is different between page 3 and page 4 in terms of what you were noting at autopsy?
Page 3 describes defining characteristics and other noteworthy features on Ms. Mullis that would belong in my report outside of injury. So it had her hair color, her eye color, if she had medical therapy, jewelry, things like that. I used a separate body diagram, as you called it, page 4, to document her injuries.
Does page 4 capture all of the defects on Ms. Mullis's body that you observed at autopsy?
Yes.
And do you see a little chart at the bottom of page 4? And if you need us to zoom this, we can. Do you see a little chart sort of at the very bottom of page 4 that has some, what I would call little carrots and some numbers next to it?
Yes.
What is that little section of page 4?
That section of page 4 has each of the 6 puncture wounds. In between each puncture wound is a measurement of distance.
Looking at page 4 and that area, here on page 4 you've measured the depths of the wounds in Ms. Mullis's back, is that right?
Yes, I see depths here. Sometimes I'll notate it on the other page with internal injuries.
I've never seen that before, Valhalla. Nothing.
Well, do you agree with me, and if you need to look at some other paperwork to answer this, I can show this to you, but do you agree with me that some of the penetrating injuries that we've been talking about on Ms. Mullis, on her back, some of those penetrating injuries were not very deep?
Similar to the injury to her lip, I think that's kind of a matter of opinion. Some were deeper than others, absolutely.
Which one of the penetrating injuries to her back were deep?
The deepest of the penetrating injuries, she had 2 that had an approximate depth of 6.5 inches. In terms of my autopsy report, those were puncture wounds B and E.
You're saying B as in boy?
B as in boy.
And E. Wound A is the wound that is to the furthest right of Ms. Mullis's back, is that right?
Yes, really on the side of her chest.
More underneath her armpit, is that right?
Yes,
Did wound A go all the way through Ms. Mullis's body?
it did.
Well, it depends on angle and stuff like that. It's so no, some of them could bounce off a rib and stuff like that. So they don't need all to be the same depth unless she was on a flat surface and it penetrated.
Was there one of the wounds on Ms. Mullis's back that was just 2 inches deep?
Yes.
Which one was that?
That was wound D. It was the inferior most wound.
You have described the wounds in her back that we've been talking about as sharp force injuries, is that right?
Yes.
Is it more accurate to call these injuries blunt injuries from a puncturing device?
No, I would prefer to say sharp force
That's again why the autopsy photos weirds me out.
injuries. Blunt force injuries, as I indicated, have a flat surface that can abrade or contuse the skin, potentially cause a laceration with impact. A sharp object will cut and divide tissue as it enters the skin. Obviously, it's a unique object for someone to be impaled with. In my opinion, sharp made the most sense.
I think Jess saw her, but I'm not sure.
Are there different characteristics for injuries that are caused by a blunt object being forced through someone's skin, like as a penetrating injury?
It's more difficult to penetrate the body with a blunt object versus a sharp one.
Thank you.
Is it true that you don't know, as you sit here today, how much more difficult it is?
It depends on the type of object, if you're comparing to.
Is
No, it's the same and the same and the same and the same and the same again, that they're trying to poke holes at her testimony, and she's not really. I feel she's very defensive.
there any difference in your mind between how, other than that it would be more difficult to penetrate the body, between how a blunt object being, through some mechanism, forced into someone's body, is there any difference in terms of how wounds caused by the blunt force object being forced through would appear or would operate in the body from a sharp object being forced into the body through some mechanism?
So the impact of a blunt object with the body, like I said, can cause abrasions, scrapes on the skin, bruising. If it's a significant impact, you can cause a laceration or a tearing of the skin, which I suppose would allow the blunt object to further enter into the body. Lacerations are irregular, and we have what's called tissue bridging, so little pieces of tissue may still connect each side of the wound. This is in contrast to a sharp object, which, as I said, cuts and divides tissue. So you shouldn't have that tissue bridging. It should be a cleaner looking wound.
Besides what you just identified, are you aware of any other differences in how a blunt object being forced through some mechanism through someone's body would operate versus a sharp object being forced through someone's body?
I'm not quite sure what you're getting at. It's vague when you say a blunt object through some mechanism. I don't know what object you're talking about or what mechanism, so I don't know what conclusions I can draw.
Well, when you examined the corn rake at issue in this case, were the tines on this corn rake blunt?
They were pointed, and both pointed and slightly rounded. So I suppose you're trying to characterize it as a blunt object.
To be clear, I'm asking you your characterization.
I
I'm not trying to
characterized
characterize it as anything.
I characterized it as a sharp object. It cut and divided the skin as it
We only had two witnesses. So far, I don't think so.
entered into it, as characterized by the well-formed round holes in Miss Mullis's back after she was impaled with it.
Well, if I hit my head on the edge of this table, that could cut and divide my skin and enter to some extent into my body, right?
That would cause a laceration, which is an irregular tearing of your skin.
But that could also enter my skin.
If a blunt object impacts your skin, that force would cause the tearing of the skin. I suppose if you were to remain in that same spot for a period of time, say the edge of the table could slightly enter into the laceration, sure. Entering in your body is, I think, misleading.
Is it true, as of your deposition testimony in this case in 2023, that in providing professional opinions about cause and manner of death, that you tend to shy away from saying that something is a possible defensive wound?
I do, and I can go back to my previous testimony today where blunt force injuries are hard to interpret.
You don't look a day over
There are
55.
injuries that are considered defensive type wounds, but at the end of the day, they're simply blunt force injuries.
Have you become shyer over the course of your career in characterizing wounds as defensive wounds?
I maintain my same position on that. Some wounds are considered defensive in nature due to their position on the body, but at the end of the day, they're blunt force injuries. And without a pattern, I can't say definitively how the injuries occurred.
Has it been your experience that sometimes in your career, people who might be calling you to testify at a trial might be pushing you to identify certain blunt force injuries as possible defensive wounds?
Yes.
And is that because identifying something as a defensive wound could have an impact on what people perceive about what the cause or manner of someone's death was?
So I determine cause and manner of death. I don't use these so-called defensive type wounds in my determination of cause and manner of death. How they're perceived in legal proceedings, I do understand that that may have an impact on a jury for them, but I do not use it for my determination of cause and manner of death.
Have you gotten better over the course of your career at pushing back on attorneys who might be asking you to characterize certain wounds as defensive wounds when, in your opinion, there's really no way to tell?
I suppose potentially we all become stronger as we get older.
And at the time you performed Ms. Mullis's autopsy, you were newer in your career.
Yes.
I mean, did you start your job as a medical examiner here in Iowa in July of 2018?
Yes.
And is it true that you're
Yeah, it's been I know what she's doing and that's her job, but it's the same question over and over again. But if you watch the Louis Marr trial, the one where they abducted the young lady and stabulated her out by the pond, I don't remember that the ME was. Maybe her vocal fry is worse when she's annoyed, but I thought she was pretty good in that case.
Your autopsy of Ms. Mullis was a few months after you started?
Yes.
Not this.
Was your job as a medical examiner in Iowa your first full-time job since you finished your fellowship?
Yes.
And I'm not asking for personal details of your life, so without identifying anything about where specifically you've lived in your life, you did not grow up in a farming community, did you?
No.
Do you have limited experience with farming?
Yes.
Well, it's to get away.
Did you
from
testify in Mr. Mullis's trial in about a year after you performed the autopsy of Ms. Mullis?
Yes.
And at the time you testified at trial, had you performed about 600 autopsies?
If that's what I said, then that would be accurate. I don't recall now.
Do you know, as you sit here today, how many autopsies you'd performed in your career that were unsupervised before you performed the autopsy in Ms. Mullis's case?
Before I did, no, I can't recall.
Had you performed about half the autopsies in your career before you performed the autopsy of Ms. Mullis?
In my career as I sit here now?
I'm saying that as of the time of your testimony at Mr. Mullis's trial, you performed about 600, correct?
If that's what I said, then yes.
All right, and as of the time of performing Ms. Mullis's autopsy about a year earlier, how many of the 600 had you done at that point?
Well, if I performed about 300 or so with my training, then I see what you're saying, then about half of that.
Okay. Was there a time in Mr. Mullis's case where counsel for Mr. Mullis sent a letter to your office requesting to meet with you about Mr. Mullis's case?
I know we were sent a letter. I don't recall if it said meet. There was information about some expert opinions that they had gathered, and there was a question as to if I wanted more information, but to meet, I would have to look again.
Did that letter ask if you'd be willing to communicate with counsel in some way, whether in person or on the phone or through some method?
I think I have a similar answer to that. I don't recall that. I'm not saying that's not what it said. There was a part of it where they said I could ask for more information. So if that's inviting a conversation, then that's along those lines, yes.
Did you decline to speak with counsel in response to that letter?
I did not.
An object is irrelevant.
Overruled, the answer will remain in the record.
Well, is there a process in forensic pathology where a forensic pathologist can change their medical opinion?
In all of medicine, you can change your medical opinion.
Is there an ethical obligation for forensic pathologists to change their opinion if they learn information that should change their opinion?
An opinion should always reflect the pathologist's true opinion. So sure, if your opinion changes, then it should be reflected in the death certificate reports,
Yes,
etc.
I probably use my phone.
Is there a process to change a death certificate?
Yes.
When you became aware of the letter that counsel had sent to your office about communicating with you about information related to Mr. Mullis.
She's the second witness, and they are just asking. This is worse than finding out, did you stand at the high top, and what music did the band play, and what, if any, snow was on the ground? I understand what she's doing. It's just so slow. And these obvious questions. Is an ME supposed to change their meaning, their opinion if another opinion has shown itself? What? Of course she is. Oh.
Mullis's case, was there any moment where you considered potentially talking with them about the information that was provided in the letter?
I did read the letter, and due to its contents, no.
Did that letter include some excerpts of what was represented in the letter as being additional excerpts?
Yeah, I agree. She seems like she's shaky, and they could potentially find some things. But it's just, it's been 2 hours and 47 minutes now asking questions. I think it would hit harder if you just got to it. Again, it's a bench trial. You don't have to perform for a jury.
Expert opinions about Mr. Mullis's case?
Yes.
And at the time of your deposition in 2023...
blink twice if you are taking over YouTube, and we'll remove all the stupid rules so we can't say anything but stabulating, pew-pewing, and red rumming.
Was the information that was provided in the letter, those excerpts, the only information you had about whatever additional experts might be saying about Mr. Mullis's case?
I'm sorry. Yes, I believe so.
And was it based on those excerpts and the content of the letter that you determined that you were not going to communicate further with Mr. Mullis's counsel about this case?
Yes.
And I think you mentioned that that letter offered to provide you with some additional information. Is that your memory?
Yes.
Did you take counsel up on that offer of providing you with some new information that you hadn't had previously?
No.
Have you at some point since your testimony at Mr. Mullis's criminal trial sent text messages to Deputy Hemaseth about Mr. Mullis's case?
Yes.
And in those text messages, have you expressed some disdain for Mr. Mullis's efforts to seek post-conviction relief?
have to look at them. I don't know.
I can show them to you. I'm going to have you look at Exhibit 230. If you need to look through more of 230, I will show it to you, but it does Exhibit 230, screenshots of text messages between your cell phone and Deputy Hemaseth's cell phone?
Yes.
And I'm going to refer you to page 11 of the exhibit. Let me have you read page 11 and let me know when you've done that.
Early mid-40s, I believe. She seems to be trying to find a weak spot. We shall see. Yeah.
Does reviewing page 11 refresh your memory about whether you've ever expressed some disdain for Mr. Mullis's efforts to get post-conviction relief to Deputy Hemaseth?
I wouldn't characterize it that way. I would characterize it as I expressed disdain for the manner in which the case was being revisited, specifically some pretty nasty things said about me by your co-counsel.
Did you share in text messages with Deputy Hemaseth a video that purported to recreate sort of what had happened in Ms. Mullis's case?
He shared with me a video.
Did you watch that video?
I did.
And did you express some disdain for the sort of way in which that video was produced in your messages with Deputy Hemaseth?
I would characterize it more as I found it amusing. It's by an individual who was harassing me, and I wasn't quite sure what it was showing, so it was an interesting thing to see.
10 days.
I want to come back to that topic, but I want to ask you about one more topic, and I'm almost done with my exam here, Dr. Cruz. At the time of your deposition in 2023, am I right that you did not know at that time the order that the 6 wounds on Ms. Mullis's back occurred?
Correct.
At that time, did you know which, if any, of these injuries happened together? Meaning that more than one tine of the corn rake went into her body at the same time?
I do not.
And at the time of your 2023 deposition, did you have in your mind's eye any particular idea of how exactly someone put the corn rake into Ms. Mullis's body other than that in some way that occurred?
I don't know exactly how she was impaled with it. I just know someone else impaled her with it.
And I appreciate, and I don't want to belabor this point, that you've said multiple times now in this testimony and elsewhere that you do not believe it is possible for Ms. Mullis to have fallen on this rake more than once. So understanding that that is your opinion, you do believe that a person could be impaled by this corn rake by falling on it one time?
I do think someone could fall on it once.
I mean, it is your belief that falling on this rake once could generate the necessary force for someone to be impaled on it?
I think it's possible, yes, for someone to be injured by a corn rake by falling on it.
And for you, is the issue with determining whether Ms. Mullis fell on this corn rake then, that while it is possible for someone to fall on a corn rake once, it is not possible, in your view, for someone to have fallen on this corn rake more than once?
Not just fallen on it more than once, fall on it, pull it out of your entire torso, fall it in again, likely pull it out, and then fall on it again with enough force to generate puncture wounds.
Can you envision a mechanism as you sit here, I want to ask you a different question. At the time of your deposition in 2023, could you envision a mechanism where someone fell on a corn rake, impaled themselves on all 4 tines of the corn rake, were able to extract some of the tines, but not all of them, from their back, and then fell back on the corn rake for the tines that had come out to re-impale into their body?
I do not think that's possible. I think significant force is required to generate those wounds, and then you're suggesting that the second fall is from a very short distance.
Did you testify? Well, I want to understand this. At the time that you testified at your deposition in 2023, did you believe it was possible for someone to have pulled some or all of the tines of the corn rake out of their body one time?
I would have to look at my deposition if I was asked that. It's hard to go back in time.
Would it refresh your memory to look at your deposition?
Sure.
And I'm going to have your 2023 deposition pulled up for you.
Oh, if this witness is on the stand longer, I need to buy a court rame to make it stop. Just want to make sure I have the name correct. It's a corn rake. A corn rake. You go to the M aisle.
We're going to come back to that
Walmart,
issue because I want to
where you
pull a
get all
page for
your
you to ask if it would
stuff.
refresh your recollection. But while we're doing that, as you sit here today, do you know the force that would be necessary for an object like a corn rake to penetrate just the clothing on someone's body?
No.
Have you, as of the time of your deposition in 2023, were you aware of any scientific sources that you could consult to answer the question of how much force would be necessary to penetrate the clothing on someone?
That's where they went in Louis Guzman trial, Louis Mar trial as well, when they got the machetes. They went to Walmart, M aisle.
Someone's body.
I don't know of any specific people who would tell me that, but I suppose I could look.
And to be clear, when I'm asking about any source, I'm not asking just about people, but any type of source that scientists would use, including reference materials or any other type of academic source. As of the time of your deposition in 2023, did you know any source that you could consult to answer that question?
Not that I recall.
All right. I want to then go back to your deposition as to my prior question, and I'm going to show you for your 2023 deposition, page 19. I'm going to have you read page 19, line 6 through line 13, just to yourself, and I'm going to ask you if that's refreshed your memory after you've done so. Yes, sorry. Page 19. This is 2023. Page 19. 6 through 13. Line 6 through 13. Yeah, the deposition.
And this is Exhibit 322, right?
Thank you very much. Yes, Exhibit 322. Okay. Have you had a chance to review that portion of your deposition?
By the way, if anyone was looking at the Benjamin Elliott trial, the sleepwalker trial, he has been found guilty.
Yes. Did reading your deposition, that portion of your deposition, refresh your memory about whether in 2023 you believed it was possible for Ms. Mullis to have pulled the rake out of her back one time?
Yes.
And what was your opinion about that at the time of your deposition?
I said that it is possible, but would likely be incredibly difficult and unlikely.
And again, as with the idea of being impaled on the rake, was it your belief in 2023 that while it was possible for someone to remove some or all of the tines of a corn rake from their own back one time, you did not believe it was possible to do that more than once.
Correct.
Just one moment, Your Honor.
No, I never watched this trial the first time around, so that's why a lot of people are telling me stuff that I don't know. So I'm just, whatever happens, happens. And machetes. If you see a machete, he has the widest neck. You can tell he's a farmer.
Dr. Cruz, as we've been discussing at length today, you're a forensic pathologist, correct?
Correct.
Do you have any expertise in the field of biomechanics?
No.
Do you have any expertise in the field of biomedical engineering?
No.
As of your deposition in 2023, had you ever consulted a biomechanical expert on a case?
No.
As of your deposition in 2023, had you ever consulted an incident reconstructionist on a case?
No.
As of 2023, was it your
someone said 4 days.
opinion that the field of biomechanical engineering is a scientific discipline?
I'm not incredibly familiar with it, but that sounds like it would be true.
I mean, do you believe, as you sit here today, that qualified biomechanical engineers are scientists and have scientific expertise?
Like I said, I'm not familiar with them, but I would agree that they probably consider themselves scientists.
At the time that you were deposed in this case in 2023, did you have any opinion on whether a biomechanical engineer could contribute to the understanding of what happened to Ms. Mullis?
It's not something that I considered in terms of needing it for my cause and manner of death.
And as of the time of your 2023 deposition,
Trial TV Live played it during the winter break.
did you maintain your opinions about the cause and manner of Ms. Mullis's death without reading the full reports of any of the experts that Mr. Mullis had consulted in his post-conviction case?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one more time?
Sure. As of the time that you were deposed in 2023, did you maintain your opinions about the cause and manner of Ms. Mullis's death without having read the full reports of any of the experts that Mr. Mullis had consulted in this case?
Yes.
Maybe it was a rake on. You know, you can get the dog bite version of the Lexus. Maybe you can get the rake version of the Lexus as well. And apparently, that's the wrong one. There's a whole lot of speculation going on about the federal investigation being ended in the Karen Reed case. As lawyer, you know, says, let's wait and see. And if it's lifted, then maybe they don't have to impound all the evidence they got from the feds, which could be interesting.
One additional issue, Dr. Cruz. At your trial testimony in Mr. Mullis's criminal case, were you asked to identify a photograph of the corn rake in this case as part of your testimony?
I would have to review, but if the record shows that, that sounds fine with me. I think that sounds appropriate.
Come on.
We have Exhibit 62 from the underlying criminal trial, which we're going to show the witness. That is not, we have a photograph of it from EDMS, which I think we'll show to the state, Erica, if you want to do that we'd like to approach the witness with. I just lost it.
Oh, that was a good series. I haven't seen that in a
show it
million years.
to the state before you bring it to the witness, but then you can certainly approach the witness whenever you're ready.
I know which.
And if someone was asking if Paul O'Keefe was married, he's married, and apparently also having a little on the side. Some online nookie, which I don't understand why you would do that.
Sorry, Ken.
Thanks for your patience, Secretary. This is the last question we have for you. Thank you. We've shown you, as best we could, a copy of State's Exhibit number 62 for Mr. Mullis's criminal trial. Is that in front of you?
Yes.
Do you see that photograph?
Yes.
What is depicted in this photograph?
This appears to be the handle portion of the corn rake. In it, there's a ruler with our state medical examiner number indicating that the photograph.
No, his appeal was denied. This is why he is filing a civil suit to have his trial tried again. So he has to prove that there's new evidence. He claims that his defense, without his consent, used someone else did it, but she was unalived. He claims it's an accident.
Was taken at autopsy.
Do you agree that this photograph does not depict the tines of the corn rake?
Correct.
From looking at
kids have
Exhibit
been behind
62,
him in
can you
court
tell
all day.
anything about whether the tines of the corn rake are sharp or not?
No.
No, Court TV just haven't showed it. It was shown on their website, so they only showed bits and pieces of it. Another trial started today was the two kids pew-pewed by their dad in Florida.
Your Honor, I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Love your accent. Recovery Addict sent us here. Will sub to you. Thank you so much, Pantoufle. Toufle? Pantoufle. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
I'm going to try to be done by 4:30.
Okay.
All right?
You may
Give me a
start
chance. I'll
your
try to get.
class.
Dr. Cruz, I don't think came planning to stay this evening. Yeah,
No.
I didn't think so.
Turn on your microphone.
So,
please.
yeah, I'll try to get through this. If I may approach the witness, I'm going to do this the old-fashioned way.
You may.
I'm going to show you three exhibits, A, B, and C. You can just take a look at those for me. What is A?
A is my CV.
He should be 18 now, yes.
I've since earned a certificate at Drake University in the education portion that I recently updated it with, but other than that, it's appropriate.
What is B?
B is, it starts with that letter to Deputy Hemastaff about his request for photographs and then continues into my autopsy report.
Is B the entirety of your autopsy report?
Yes.
The
And then
state
what
said
is
they
C?
would be done by 4:30, so
C is a
16
quality
minutes most.
assurance paper as part of our standard protocol at my office. All cases that are deemed homicide are formally reviewed by another pathologist in our office.
Is that a record that's normally maintained in your office as part of your certification?
Yes.
Okay. In as much as they're not admitted, we'd offer A, B, and C.
Any objection? They will be admitted.
Moist o'clock?
All right, Dr. Cruz, you were
yeah.
asked about a deposition where it was page 19. Do you recall? It was just a minute ago.
Yes.
All right, and on the page, do you have that page in front of you?
No.
You guys have that on? Please, I'm not connected. Page 19.
Would you mind if we just showed this copy just to
Please.
You may.
her testimony?
Tomorrow at 11, there will be the continuation of the hearing that Bev ended abruptly last week. So we can find out what, if any, reason she had. If it's just because she believed Hank when he lied and said that the defense didn't turn over the evidence, or There's been a million speculations. Baker, it's been a year. Woohoo! Thank you. Thank you, Wells Lady Reads. Sorry.
Thank you.
See page 19 of the deposition?
Yes.
All right, and then was lines, I think, 8 through 11 you were asked to review.
Yes.
In lines 8 through 11, you said that she could have pulled it out of her once, meaning the rake, correct?
Yes.
All right, the next sentence is the difficulty of that in someone's back with the depth of the tines to me seems incredibly unlikely. True?
Yes.
All right, then what's the last line? I don't believe that was mentioned. What was the last comment that you made in that deposition on page 19?
I say, and then the thought that she fell on it again, pulled it out, and again, it's just not a feasible possibility.
Okay. Any of those opinions or characterizations, have those changed for you at all over this course of time?
No.
Okay. All right, I want to talk a bit about the process that you follow at the medical examiner's office. Where is the medical examiner's office?
Ankeny, Iowa?
And are there other forensic pathologists that work there?
Yes.
How many?
At the time, there were 3 other forensic pathologists.
Okay, and currently there's also 3 others other than you, is that right?
There are 4 others now.
Sorry.
You didn't
I
miss
missed
much,
one.
Helena.
And who is the state medical examiner?
Dr. Dennis Klein?
And would Dr. Klein have been the doctor that hired you?
Yes.
All right. And as you have other assistants at the medical examiner's office, can you just briefly describe that for the court?
Sure. So in terms of our office, we have Dr. Dennis Klein. He is the chief state medical examiner. We have Dr. Jonathan Thompson. He's the deputy state medical examiner. He's also the one who formally reviewed my report. At the time, Dr. Michelle Catalier was the other associate state medical examiner with me. Currently, the associate state medical examiners are Dr. Jacob Smith and Dr. Allison Haid.
And as part of your work and routine in examining cases,
Welcome, Kim.
do you frequently consult with one another?
Yes.
Okay, does that happen on a daily basis?
Yes.
Anytime you might have a difficult case or something that might be confusing to you, can you rely on them to help you?
Yes.
And in this case, whenever you did the autopsy of Amy Mullis, would that same support system have been in place for you?
Yes.
Do you also have the use of investigators in your office?
Yes.
What does an investigator in the medical examiner's office do?
Our medico-legal death investigators are each assigned one person to a case. They will communicate with law enforcement. They gather law enforcement reports, medical records. They talk to family and gather any other information that we may need for a determination of cause and manner of death.
And would you have had that resource available to you in the investigation and the autopsy of Amy Mullis?
Thank
Yes.
you, Queen Olive.
Is there a quality control process in place at the medical examiner's office?
Yes.
Describe that for us, please.
Part of our regular quality control is for any case for both cause and manner are undetermined, or where manner is homicide, the case is formally reviewed by one of the other pathologists. They fill out a form where they say if photographs, documentation, our ultimate opinion are all correct, and if they agree, and then they sign that form. We also review random reports throughout
Sinbad, thank you for 8 months. I'll be stream hopping manana. 2 of my favorites. Thank you so much.
the year per name guidelines on cases that are natural, suicide, and accident.
You had mentioned earlier in your direct that you were performing more than one autopsy at the same time as Amy Mullis. Is that right?
To the best of my recollection, yes, that's standard.
Okay, so that's what I'm getting at. Is that a standard practice?
Yes.
is there any concern in your mind that cases get confused or that creates any type of issue with either one of those cases?
Never. That's my normal day.
Okay. And do the other pathologists, the forensic pathologists in your office, do the same thing?
Yes.
And at those autopsies, even though you're doing more than one, do you have the resources available to you that you've just described?
Yes.
Now, from beginning to end on autopsy, you were asked that the physical autopsy that you do was about 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah, I find that very unprofessional. Yeah, of course you can do stuff and take notes and make sure, okay, I'm writing this is what I find on this body, but 3 at a time? Why don't you? I know it's people who are not here anymore, but if you went to a normal surgeon and said, just have 3 running, it's the same thing you're doing with them. You can just have 3 patients at a time. Why? It's not more efficient. You can't tell me that.
Is that correct?
Correct.
But the whole process takes much longer than that. Isn't that true?
Yes.
Can you describe that for the court, please?
The physical autopsy itself is really the shortest portion of the whole process. The autopsy examination is performed with the photographs and the collection of evidence and other items. I then write my report. I review photographs as part of that report writing process, and then I wait for the results of any ancillary testing to return, such as toxicology, histology, looking at things under the microscope. That takes time, can take a matter of weeks. During that time, law enforcement reports, medical record reports, any other information is gathered as well and then reviewed by me. Once everything is back, everything is re-reviewed by me. My report is edited and then ultimately finalized. Since, for example, in this case, since it was a homicide, before the report was officially finalized, it received a QA by Dr. Thompson.
All right. So what date did...
But remember, this is the first unaliving in 10 years in this county. So it's not like there's that much. Jemima says, thank you everyone for being patient with Discord. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Yes, please do that. And thank you again for all your raters.
This case present to you, what was the first day you would have started working on it?
The autopsy was performed on November 12th of 2018.
And when did you sign out the final report?
The final report was signed on December 17th of 2018.
So nearly a month.
Yes.
And at any point in that time frame, if you would have received other information that would have either contradicted your findings or caused you to change your opinions, would you have done that?
Yes.
Since the autopsy report has been finalized, you've been provided a lot of other information, correct?
Yes.
You've reviewed a report that essentially has criticized your findings. Is that true?
Objection, Your Honor. This goes to the issue raised about cabining her opinions to her 2023 deposition.
I think you opened the door.
As someone just pointed out, it's because it's a state examiner, not a county examiner. I didn't think about that one. But yeah, that's correct. This lady is the same ME who did Louis Marr trial, so she must be state.
Around that, Ms. Thompson. Mr. Brown, do you want to respond?
Well, yeah. I mean, they want to sit here and complain about Dr. Cruz's opinions. They keep pigeonholing her to only go to the 2023. Clearly, they have other information that they're going to offer that criticizes Dr. Cruz's opinions. She has reviewed that information, and I expect her testimony to be that she has not changed her opinion, even based upon that. That's what I'm getting at. They cannot open this door and then close it on us. This is clearly admissible.
This has to do with the court's pretrial ruling about the purposes for which she was designated in this case, and her designations not designating her as a cross expert to respond on the applicant's experts, Your Honor. I mean, if the court determines I opened the door in my exam, while I might disagree, I would respect that, but this was the court's pretrial ruling.
And I agree, which is why I was surprised by some of your questions that we were going there. I'm just looking back at my notes, but
This is a hearing, a civil suit to try and get a new appeal. So this is almost live. We are like 2 minutes behind, 5 minutes.
I understood some of your questions to be quite broad and to open
8 minutes.
the door. So I think this question at least is fair. So the objection's going to be overruled. Do you remember the question at this point?
I would ask that it be read back. If
Well, and there was an objection, so it'll have to be, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. I really wanted some door opening last week in the pianist trial.
You've reviewed a report that essentially has criticized your findings. Is that
May I continue with that, Judge?
You may.
Okay, you've reviewed a report that has essentially criticized your findings in this case, correct?
Yes.
Has that, and you've done a thorough review of that report?
Yes.
Is that from Dr. Hammers?
Yes.
And has that review caused you to change any of the opinions that you've given in this case?
No.
During an autopsy, there was some questions that you were asked concerning law enforcement being present.
Yes.
How often does that happen in autopsies that you perform?
On a pretty regular basis, I imagine potentially weekly.
And is that something your office invites?
I'll answer when they're done.
You want that assistance?
Yes.
What's the purpose of a law enforcement officer being at the autopsy?
Law enforcement officers can learn a lot from the autopsy. We encourage them to come. They interact a lot with family and may learn how to better investigate a case, to not disturb the body in a certain way that might affect us at autopsy. We think they benefit greatly from it. Also in terms of, wound interpretation or any other sort of questions, if they're available at time of autopsy, that's beneficial to us.
And other than Deputy Hemus South, was there any other law enforcement that you consulted during the autopsy of Amy Mullis?
No.
Okay. And concerning how Amy Mullis was found, you've been provided a description of that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you know the source of that information?
It's my understanding the source is her family, her son, and her husband.
Okay. Is there any, as far as you know, any law enforcement that made those observations?
No.
Come on. Come on.
Okay, Dr. Cruz, there were some notes that were reviewed with you by counsel that related to a conversation.
It's the court
you had with
reporter.
John
It's very
Corbett.
loud.
Yes.
There was a comment in there concerning injuries being consistent with the fall.
Yes.
What was that? What were you referencing?
Well, those are his notes. And as we established earlier today, the blunt force injury she sustained have been from a fall.
So the blunt force being what? The injury to the chin?
Correct. Her abrasions and her contusion.
You were not meaning to reference the injuries from the tines of the rake?
No.
Okay.
It's a civil suit. I don't know if you can do the process. Enjoying your channel. Your voice is soothing and calms me. Thank you. That means a lot when you normally watch at Recovery Addict, because he has the best voice on all of LawTube. So that means a lot. Thank you so much.
Dr. Thompson is the local, or was the local medical examiner at the time of Amy Mullis's death?
Yes, he's a county medical examiner who I believe was covering for Delaware County while the regular medical examiner was out of town.
Just to put this into context, every county has its own county medical examiner, is that right?
Yes.
And this is usually just a local doctor that goes through some basic training.
Yes, they have to be a physician, and experience and training vary.
Right, and that training is provided by your office.
Yes.
Dr. Thompson would not be qualified to perform the examination that you perform, correct?
Correct.
Right. They're just local boots on the ground, so to speak.
Yes, and who have medical training to assist them with their judgment.
Prior to November of 2023, did you know Dr. Thompson personally?
No.
Had you ever worked with him before, as long as you know? Had you ever worked
No.
with him at all?
No.
Was he the first person that brought this information to your attention, that there were injuries that he thought were suspicious?
We have a morgue attendant who answers our phone at the office, who would have connected me with Dr. Thompson. The only other person who would say that beforehand would be just someone letting me know Dr. Thompson called. He has concerns, give him a call back. But direct concerns came from him.
And you would certainly consider that, at least initially, in your examination of Amy Mullis, correct?
I respect his medical opinion.
As you would if any other autopsy where the county medical examiner would provide you some information, correct?
Correct.
You were asked about the toxicology panel?
Yes.
All right. I get a couple questions with that, and I'm just about done. You were asked whether or not you looked for prescription medications.
Yes.
All right. You said no.
Some were included on that basic panel, but outside of prescription medications of abuse.
I don't think you were asked why you didn't do that. So why wouldn't you have expanded that panel with the toxicology lab that you work with?
Expanded toxicology panels are ordered when the drugs in a person's system may have contributed to their death or directly caused a person's death. In a case where someone has an injury that caused their death, drugs within their system are usually irrelevant. In this case, I deemed them non-contributory to Ms. Mullis's death. We order toxicology routinely, so I ordered the basic panel. The expanded panel, which would be, in addition to most cases, was not appropriate at all in this case. I knew her cause and manner of death at the end of autopsy.
And you would have access to even consulting with a forensic toxicologist if needed, is that right?
Yes.
Did you feel that was necessary in this case at all?
No.
And context, you were asked about the context of how the body was found and where it was found. I believe you said that you did not consider that at all, or that didn't factor into your opinions?
Correct.
Okay, can you tell us why not?
I am able to interpret wounds on a person's body. Information about how a person was found needs to be considered carefully. I did not know those things to be true. the way the handle was sticking out of Miss Mullis has no bearing on the fact that she was impaled with a corn rake more than once. It doesn't change my cause of death. It doesn't change my manner of death.
And whenever you say she was impaled with a corn rake theoretically could have been swung, correct?
Yes.
Could have been pushed into her?
Yes.
Like a knife?
Yes.
Right? Or in some other way, correct?
Yes.
You know that the rake was, the rake was what caused the injuries that caused her death, correct?
Yes.
All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Any redirect?
Extremely briefly, Your Honor. You've described the quality control process at the medical examiner's office, Dr. Cruz. Did the quality control process at the medical examiner's office catch this error that you described in your opinion section that was I think you used the word, and I don't want to misstate your testimony, but an obvious error or a glaring error?
Yeah, I don't remember if I used those words either, but no, it did not catch the error.
That's an error that you immediately recognized in re-reviewing your report. Is that right?
I did.
Okay. Is it your belief that the quality control process in place at the medical examiner's office is consistent with other quality control practices across forensic pathology?
It's in keeping with requirements by the National Association of Medical Examiners. I don't know what other offices do.
You testified that you later learned some information about how Ms. Mullis was found, and I think it was your testimony that the source of that information was members of the Mullis family. Is that right?
Yes.
Did anyone ever provide to you recorded interviews of Todd Mullis and Tristan Mullis talking about this issue?
Not that I remember.
As of your deposition in 2023, did you have any idea what Todd Mullis and Tristan Mullis had said to law enforcement about this issue?
Well, 10 days.
In terms of directly from them?
Not that I recall.
And you described that you had resources at the medical examiner's office that were at your disposal to conduct a further investigation into this case. Is that right?
We have investigators who can help me gather information about the case.
You told me earlier in your exam, which might feel like a long time ago to both of us, that there was no requirement after the physical examination portion of your
He looks very tanned and he looks very buff for someone in prison. A lot of people have talked about he has a very good tan, especially it's in Iowa. Do they have tanning beds in prison in Iowa?
autopsy for you to make your findings at that time. Is that right?
Correct.
And in fact, I think your testimony was that that's the shortest part of the process, correct?
The autopsy itself is, yes.
The physical autopsy isn't even really the end of your basic process for collecting information about an investigation. Is that right?
Correct. I gather information after the autopsy and consider all that information before finalizing my report. In this case, my opinion always stayed the same.
In this case, you made your determination after the physical examination and did not change it after that.
Correct.
No other questions, Your Honor. One moment, Your Honor. I'm sorry.
Of course.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Okay.
You just told us no more questions. It's almost midnight. I want to go to bed. I have court tomorrow. Well, that sheriff looked like he hadn't left high school.
Your Honor, with the exhibits from today, which I think if the parties are in agreement, this doesn't require more foundation or authentication. I think we can address that tomorrow potentially. I just don't want to lose my chance to solve that problem, but I don't believe there is an issue with anything we offered.
Yes. Yes, Your Honor. I think the parties had talked informally during the break, and we came to an agreement on all the exhibits that were referenced, I believe. If there's a specific exhibit you want to
He has a
clarify,
massive neck.
otherwise.
I don't want to waste the court's time with this at 4:40, so I think the parties are in agreement, they've conferred, and we can address that tomorrow with the court's permission.
That's fine with me, as long as you guys are comfortable that we won't have any hiccups with it.
I think we're fine, Your Honor. We've conferred, Your Honor.
Okay. Any recross, Mr. Brown?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Dr. Cruz, you may step down. Thank you. It is time to recess for the day. We'll plan on picking back up tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Okay, thank you. Have a nice evening.
Out of monetization. I don't know what that means. Why was Trial TV live in YouTube jail? They lost their monetization because they were just restreaming trials and didn't add new content. YouTube do stupid things. It's because there's been a lot of those React channels that just showed other people's work and then monetized that. But that's why they are on screen now. But that's what they have had. Beautiful Waterfall asks, what grounds is he using to try and get a new trial? Well, they will have to show something new. Compared to his first trial, it is someone didn't unalive her. It was an accident, because at the first trial, he claims his defense, without his acceptance, used she was killed, but he didn't do it defense. Where he is now trying, she fell on the rake twice, maybe 3 times. Bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it works. No, thank you so much for sending all your nice people over here. It's so nice that so many people can swing by and everything is still hunky-dory. We don't get into a fight. I wish that was so on many other channels. But thank you all first and foremost for all the subscriptions, and welcome to the Discord. Tomorrow will be a little bit of a special day because I'll start out covering this. And then I'll swing over to the Karen Reed case. I think so, because I also have jury duty tomorrow. For those of you who are new here, I am what's called a layman in Denmark. That's our jury system where we are jurors for 4 years at a time. And then you do way more cases than you do as a juror in the US. And I have a trial tomorrow. I believe it's some financial crime that I can't remember it. So I'll have trial for myself tomorrow. Then I'll probably start out doing the first hour of this, then jump over and do the Karen Reed hearing, and then jump back and do this again. So it's going to be a little bit of a mishmash week this week. Thursday, I will have Julio Law on at 1 p.m. Eastern to talk about the Brian Koberger case, because I didn't follow it. I haven't really gotten up to date on it, so we will do a Koberger special stream, and then we'll cover this as time goes by. 4 years. Well, I have been doing it for 13 or 14 years now. We sign up and it's a 4-year period. Normally you have like 4 or 5 cases a year, but I'm on their speed dial list, so I have somewhere between 10 and 20. Wow, I think my max had been like 20 cases a year. So that's fun. That's why I had the interest in watching trials. And that's why I don't know all the law stuff, but I watch it as a juror. Enjoy. It's a good time to see, to spend. No, I'm not forced to do it. I sign up for it. Every 4 years, you apply to be a member of the group that they then draw the layman from. And then you serve for the next 4 years. it's voluntary. It's so we have a stable core of jurors, so we don't have to do like you go out and pick 12 people who doesn't want to be there. We are not 4 men. We are 1 judge and 2 laymen at the level I'm at. So it's way easier. That's not so much theatrics. The case tomorrow, I think it's right now. I have 5 cases we have started and I haven't finished because we are also swamped. I think tomorrow is someone who owes some back taxes, but so it's nothing interesting. But I have done 1 murder trial, so I have that to be cool about. Yeah, it makes sure that the people who will serve on the jury are people who don't sit there and think, "Can I get out of here?" But the good thing about it is also we get paid way better than American jurors do. So, well, sometimes some people fight when chat. So, yeah, no one is forced in Scandinavia. It's a choice. That's how we do it. We are 2 juries and 1 judge, and we have a democratic. We do the verdict and sentencing at one time, and so every one of us 3 have 1 vote each, and the majority rule. So if 2 people say guilty and 1 say not guilty, they will be found guilty, but then it'll be told we are split on the decision. We could also have 1 person saying guilty and 2 saying not guilty. Then you are not guilty because majority rules in the Danish court system. So it's a little more democratic, but it's. No, I don't get lunch. I have to pay my own lunch, but I get paid $70 for a day in court. So that's enough to pay my own lunch. See you later, Red Pin. Well, you still have to pay 42% in taxes. We have 50 different processes depending on state. Yeah, that's the thing. But everyone, it is 6 minutes till midnight, and I have to be in court by 9. So I'm gonna dump you off somewhere. I'll just try and find someone who is streaming live at this time. It's a weird time. Recovery addicts, thank you so much for hanging out with the Muffin Tops. You are cool people. But it's because you follow a cool streamer. That's why you are coolios. So swing by anytime you need a place to hang out. And if you don't need a place to hang out, but Recovery Addict is taking a day off, you're always welcome back here. And I hope you have a wonderful night and come back anytime you wanna, because we're cool people here too.
What exhibit are you referring to?
I'm going to make this 100, Your Honor.
All right.
100. Because it is 100% correct.
Checking your honor.
So you literally built a cannon?
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Go
All right, I'm in love.
back. Please do that again. Oh, that was the cutest thing I've ever seen.
While I'm waiting for this, did you, whether it's true or not, believe that Mr. Randolph had slept with your wife?
I wouldn't have cared.
You wouldn't have cared?
No.
Did you believe he had slept with your wife?
No.
Did you believe he slept with your mother-in-law?
Probably did. Everybody has.
So there.
Everybody has.